All right. All right. So we're on session 2. So we'll do a little bit of recap of yesterday. But before we get started, everybody take in 5 deep breaths with me. Ready? Inhale. Exhale. You guys are exactly like my jiu-jitsu class. Inhale. Deep breaths. Exhale. Push it out. Inhale. Isaiah. Exhale. 2 more. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Thank you. All right, now that we have all taken in enough oxygen in our brains, all right, let's kind of go into session 2. And what I want to really focus on today, if everybody can focus in, please, all right, is how our methods are driven by our social philosophy and our mission. All right, and there's a very, very important reason why yesterday we discussed our mission in depth and our social philosophy in depth. Because before we can really understand why we do what we do, why do we de-escalate, why do we think of discipline from a different perspective, why do we believe love and character building are together, why all these things, all these methods, the whole, as some of you have already heard, the whole inch-wide, mile-deep approach. Every method that we use is driven by our social philosophy and our mission. So it's important that before we kind of go in there, that we review a little bit of our mission and we review a little bit of what we learned yesterday regarding our social philosophy so that we can have a backdrop, all right, and a background on why exactly is it important that we use the same methodology. All right, so let's start with our mission. What's our mission? Okay, reach, transform, elevate. Hey, you all sound like robots. All right, through what? Through love
and building character.
and character, right? And we do it, right? All right, so again, these two concepts, inseparable from each other, right? Why is the mission important again? What were some of the things that we said? Keeps us focused, right? And this is really important because when we go to our methods, all right, again, this goes back to personal bias. There is a tendency for us as human beings to go for what is instinctive or personal beliefs. Okay? So what do I mean by this? What I mean is, for example, there is an instinctive belief that what is the best way to increase academics in school? Tutoring. That the best way to increase math and science is to do what?
Teach math and science.
Do more math and science. That's instinctive. However, factually, is that correct?
No.
Based on what we know about human brain and brain development, is that correct? No. So why then do humans revert to that? Because of personal beliefs and instinct, it's the easiest thing to do when you forget your philosophy and mission. So for example, when you're in a school setting, your mission is to what? Educate kids. But because of whether it's testing scores, whatever other drives, you forget the mission and you revert back to what is instinctive and easy. And a lot of our methods, as we learn today and review today, are not necessarily instinctive. For example, this is going to be a review of de-escalation. Is de-escalation natural for humans? No. If there was a threat, what is your natural response? Fight or flight. Run or fight back. Right? So to de-escalate is an unnatural, non-instinctive, non-personal, belief-driven methodology. So that's why it's really, really important that we hone in on the mission, because this gives us away from this and puts us in focus. Why else is a mission important? Why is this mission important? It communicates why we exist. So for my managers here, it's so important that when you train, you drill down the mission. If you're training methods without drilling down mission, you are absolutely failing. Because the methods are useless without understanding why you're doing it that way in the first place. Because again, it goes back to human nature. If Andres doesn't understand why he has to de-escalate, and it's so much easier just to yell at a kid and tell the kid, shut up, and that's what he's used to, why would he go through the troubling process of de-escalating? So the reality of it is, the mission and the philosophy is more important than the methods. It drives the methods. Humans tend, when you begin to really build a relationship with humans, humans tend to do things that they understand. Think about your personal life. For those of you that made hard choices in your life, was it because, especially for people that, like easiest thing, for most people who become vegetarians or vegans, those decisions often come not because they were forced to, but because they understood a deeper reason behind it, which made it easier to anchor themselves into that, into something very difficult. It's the same thing here. When you're asking people to do methodologies that are difficult and maybe against the grain, it's better for them to understand why and get a buy-in. That's why mission is important, because if Devin knows why he should go through the process and the trouble of doing it this way, and he has buy-in in that, he's more likely to do the methods. So that's important. So why else is the mission important? The focus, the whole being able to communicate it, why else is that important? Why else is the mission important?
So we're all on the same page.
So that we are all on the same page. All right? Kids are funny creatures because they're humans, just like you and me. And we're funny creatures, right? As an adult, we like to play the system. Don't lie to me, we all do. we try to get the best bang for our buck. That's what we do as adults, right? If there is a way to get something free multiple times, most adults will do it. If there's a way to cut on our taxes and pay less, most adults will do it. If there's a way to create shortcuts in our job and not get caught, just being real, most adults will do it. Well, guess what? Kids are the same way. Kids are no different from you and me. So when they are in a place where it's not consistent, guess what kids do? They play the system, much like adults do. It has nothing to do with the fact that they're kids. It has to do with the fact that they're human beings, just like you and me. Because we play the system just as much as kids do. Only difference is we don't get caught as much as kids. Because we've gotten practice, remember? Adults are just kids who have more experience and practice. Right? So in the same sense, the mission allows for consistent methodology. That's what Aracelo is saying. There's consistency. Everybody's on the same page, which then gets a child to understand that regardless of which adult he goes to, the answer will, for the most part, remain the same. So for example, going back to love and character, right? If we don't understand that this is a product of both, and one of us buys into the fallacy that, oh no, you know, everything is nice and rainbow unicorn, and then one of us buys to everything is rules. These kids have no discipline, so they need to be rules. And then you have an adult who's playing both, then what you have is the mom and pop syndrome. When a child doesn't get his way, guess who he goes to? Well, depends on the kind of parent, kind of home, but traditionally they'll go to mom, like in a traditional household setting, right? To the one who's more lenient, to the one who's kind of here. Yeah, do whatever. Because they know they'll get a different answer. Right? It's the same thing in an organization. And then what that happens is it becomes unfair to the rest of the staff. This is how you get the bad guy syndrome, where all of a sudden somebody has to march in because everybody else has told this kid a different answer, and then that adult becomes the bad guy. That's the problem, is when people don't understand how the mission and the philosophy drives the methods. So when the adults are all consistent, like Araceli said, and are all on the same page, then a child is less likely to jump the hoops. Because they know when they go to Desmond, they will more than likely get the same love and the same character that they're being asked to do as if they go to ISA. And when they go to ISA, they know that they will probably get the exact same answer as they would to Fernando. They would get both the love and the character building that's necessary. So that's why it is important. So now, coming from our mission, let's go a little bit to our social philosophy. In summary, what is our social philosophy? Who can summarize our very long, intricate social philosophy? Summarize it in your own understanding. Oh, and by the way, I want to thank everybody for your reflections last night. I read them, and I'm glad we made it anonymous. But for those of you that really poured your heart out in those reflections, some of those reflections were extremely powerful and meaningful for me. Some of you really put some stories out there that I'm surprised how willing you were to share those in that manner. So I want to thank everybody who did that, because those stories are powerful, and it drives what we do. So thank you for doing that. But going back to this topic at hand, social philosophy, who can summarize your own understanding of what our social philosophy is at higher ground? Come on. Don't be shy. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to not get it in your first try.
So that's the bubble thing that you...
Yeah, go ahead.
This is like, just understanding that to have a balance of respecting where they come from, but pushing them to be better, but also not babying them.
Very good. So it's a balance of their individual, where they come from, and the environment factors that's there, but also at the same time nurturing how they can be better. That's a very good interpretation of our social philosophy. Who else? Rima.
A person's success is not independent of their individual choices, and nor is it independent of how society views them and social disadvantages. It's a combination of both.
Very good. Another very good interpretation, that a person's success or ability to contribute to the community is not independent of solely individual choices. You know, the whole example I gave where a Hollinger teacher said poverty is a choice, right? It's not entirely that, but also not entirely dependent on the fact that they were born in a disadvantaged system, right? We recognize that there is a disadvantaged, unfair system in our society, that we all, to a certain degree, there are kids of privilege and kids who are not, right? But at the same time, their individual choices also make up of that. So it's a balance of both. Who else has another interpretation? Those are both very good interpretations. Anybody else?
Not being their savior or their fixing them, but then also not giving up on them when they get there.
So, very good interpretation, a very important interpretation, that we, all right, are neither savior, right, nor quitters. Because if children do have individual choices, you're not their savior. All right, that means they have their own abilities and they can do it. And again, it goes back to arrogance, right? Just because, and this is something that I was discussing with another staff member, just because you had certain privileges does not mean that you are better than them as a human being. And the whole pobrecito savior mentality is actually an insult to the kids that you are serving. Because they're not pobrecito. All right, you are not better than them. They don't need your pity. Right? However, at the same time, we understand that they have learned behaviors. That they will, every once in a while, or more often than not, push you away. Why will they push you away? As a result of their advantage and privilege, or as a result of their disadvantage and oppression. These are learned self-destructive behaviors, right? So it is our job, part of our job to what as adults? To go past the whole quit on me to understanding that every child actually don't want you to quit on them. Right? That no matter how many times they push you away, they're pushing you away because that is a learned behavior. One of the best examples was what Christina said when we did the object lesson. She knew she should have trusted her team more. But because she was put at a disadvantage, she reverted to survival mode. And what is survival mode? Ball hog. Right? And in that simple exercise, that is the same as in every human being. If as a child you have been constantly oppressed and constantly abused by the adults around you, are you going to trust an adult trying to take care of you? No. So yes, that is a self-destructive, but it is a learned behavior. That's why every once in a while, or more often than not, you get those kids that you think you're making so much progress on. Right? Oh, yay, yay, yay. And then all of a sudden, what do? They turn right back around and tell you, screw you, and bite the hand that feeds. Again, if you were in the pobrecito mentality, you take that personally and you had this savior mentality, you get offended. And you say, oh, how dare you, after everything I've done for you. That's why we can't fall into that trap. It's a normal trap. If you felt that way, welcome to the club. It's just normal in what we do. We will feel that way. Right? But again, remembering we're not their savior, it becomes easier to understand that, you know what? That is simply a learned behavior. They're not trusting an adult because they're going back to what they know. And what they know is what? Adults are bad. I mean, come on, let's be real. For most of our kids, most of the adults in their life are bad examples. I mean, name a story of a kid and we'll always figure out a way to point at an adult that caused a whole lot of the problems that we're experiencing. But again, that is a learned behavior. And what is the beauty of a learned behavior? What is the beauty of this? What is the hope in this? If it's a learned behavior, it means what? It can be changed because learned behaviors are simply skills or lack of skills. You behave according to your lack of skills. So for example, let's take basketball, right? If you always just never got taught how to play basketball and you shot a certain way and you kept missing, that's a skill. That's a lack of skill. Until you learn to flick your wrist, rotate the ball, use your feet, put your feet in the right position, right? You can unlearn your really bad habits. That's the beauty of learned behavior. You can unlearn it. And once you unlearn it, you can replace it with new skills. And new skills create new behavior. And that's what our social philosophy believes. New behavior creates better choices. Right? Because think about it. When you're playing basketball and you don't know how to shoot, what is the manifestation of that behavior? Do you take shots when you get the ball? No. That's a learned behavior because you don't know how. But the moment you start learning how to shoot, what are you more likely to do once you get the ball? You're more likely to shoot because your confidence builds. And the more you keep making the basket, the more likely you are to keep shooting. But the problem is, when you miss and your coach constantly yells at you or pull you out of the game, what happens to you? You don't want to shoot. You revert back to your learned behavior, even though you have a new set of skills. So for a lot of our kids, that's what happens. Even though they're learning a new set of skills, you wonder, why are they reverting back to this? They know I can be trusted. They know we've always been there for them. Well, Because as a society, we don't like mistakes. Right? It's funny. You never hear of a parent getting mad at their child for falling down when learning to walk. In fact, we think it's cute. We think it's cute that they fall down. Or when they mess up words. Parents record their kids messing up words all the time and think it's the cutest thing. Ah, he said, you know, it sounds like a cuss word. My nephew had a dog named Fluffy. And he used to say it, Fluffy. And we all thought it was the funniest thing. Right? Again, it was okay for them to make mistakes, but then somewhere along the way, as adults, we begin to castigate kids for not developing at the rate that we expect them to be, or for making mistakes. Think about this. It goes from it's cute to mispronounce words to all of a sudden, your kid is in kinder and can't read. So what? There are kids that are developmentally behind in reading, but that doesn't mean they're behind. It just hasn't clicked on them. Kenji is one of the best readers in his grade now. Up until first, second grade, he couldn't read. The best advice we got was from his second grade teacher saying, just let him read and let him make mistakes so that he can have fun reading. Just let him read and pretend to read. Because the teacher recognized it's okay. And then the teacher said, put him in gate. I'm like, he can barely read. He's failing all his testing scores. It's like, it doesn't matter. Put him in gate. He thinks very differently. This teacher did not label him based on his developmental growth. But see, as adults, we have this expectation kids should be here. And if they're not there, oh, you're terrible. You're a terrible human being. Terrible human being. They make mistakes. It's no longer cute. Why didn't you do it this way? I told you to do it this way. Right? And all of a sudden, they have this learned behavior. So now, when they're learning new skills, instead of continuing the new behavior and better choices, they revert back to learned behavior because adults castigate them for making mistakes, which was perfectly normal when they were learning to walk. Can you imagine castigating a kid learning to walk every time they fall and crawl and we get upset at them? Do you think that kid will learn to walk? Probably not, but that's what we do every day in school or as a society of adults. That's literally what we do with our kids every day. We castigate them for those mistakes. So part of our social philosophy is understanding that that's not okay. That as a society, we need some reforms so that kids have better opportunity to learn new skills for better behavior and better choices. So part of that in all of this is understanding this word, discipline. Woohoo! All right, some of you, this is a review of this training, right? For some of you, this is something brand new, but we are going to tackle this whole word of discipline. Because traditionally, how have we viewed discipline? What is discipline traditionally? Punishment. We equate discipline to punishment. Now again, I'm not for or against spanking. Don't ask me my view on that, on this setting. All right? But again, discipline in traditional homes is even often referred to as spanking. When a parent is asked, do you discipline your child, the automatic assumption is, do you spank your child? Right? Traditionally, when we think of discipline, it's punishment. What else do we traditionally equate with discipline? Outside of punishment. Huh? Learning patience, right? What else do we traditionally equate with discipline? When do you discipline? When you're wrong. When you make a mistake. In fact, you rarely hear in our society of people disciplining for the sake of discipline. You don't discipline your child unless they do something wrong. Right? I mean, come on. For most of us that were raised at homes, or for most of us that are parents, this is absolutely true. What else do we naturally equate with discipline? What? Rigid instruction. That's actually better than most definitions, because at least the word instruction is there. But the whole rigid, that there's rigidity, that there's only right and wrong. And what happens when you're right? You get ignored. You don't get a reward. You just get ignored. That's why good kids get ignored. And when you're wrong, what happens? You get punished. And all these plans are there. When you look at our education system is designed for the upper 10% who are performing and the lower 10% that aren't. And the rest of the 80% of kids are just fumbling along because they're not too problematic to be disciplined. And they're not too smart to be accelerated. So they're just there, and we're pushing them out, just like factory workers. Pushing them out. Yeah, go, move forward, right? So this is the traditional viewpoint of discipline. That discipline is punishment. You know, this is actually not so traditional unless you live in Japan. Patience, right? That it's only done when they commit wrong or mistakes, and that it's rigid instruction, right? This is so important because discipline is one of the few things that over time, if you do the research, discipline has evolved into a very negative connotation, especially in parenting circles. Yeah, a lot of parents, you know, they don't like this word anymore, especially newer parents. Why? Why don't new parents like this? Because what? Come on. Some of you know what I'm talking about. Because they were disciplined when they were younger, and did they like it?
No, so they're going to do the complete opposite of what their parents are doing.
You hear it all the time. My parents did this to me, so I'm never doing that to my kid. It's trauma. I mean, if we really want to point to it, discipline is now equated to something traumatic, which shouldn't be. But it has, right? Because again, of the traditional definitions of punishment, wrong, rigid instruction. So now we have kids that are growing up without boundaries. Because their parents are really kind of in this lost state of, what do I do? In our work, the most common question I get asked from the age of 20, mind you, I am a very young parent. I get asked by parents double my age all the time, how do I discipline my child? I'm like, you should know this. You have a teenage child already. And you're barely asking me this question, and I'm half your age. It sounds funny, but it is a very, very valid concern for a lot of parents. Because to them, they don't want the discipline that they were raised with. They're like, my parents did X, Y, Z to me. I don't want to do that to my kid. Told me, please don't do this to my child, because my dad did that to me, and I went down the wrong road.
Well, if they know that something went wrong, then why don't they do the opposite of it?
But see, they don't know what the opposite is. They don't know what the opposite of this discipline is. They only know that punishment, that rigid, that mistake equals punishment. They don't have any other model. You will be surprised when you've talked to as many parents as we have. You will be surprised how many parents are really literally in that mode of, I don't know what to do. I have no other model. I don't know what to do with my child. And it just stacks on. Because as children get older and older, they do more and more learned behavior. And the more learned behavior you have, the harder it is to unlearn those things. All right, so it's really important. The true meaning of discipline before it got twisted to punishment, all right, is actually very simple. It means to teach. That's why in college we call it different disciplines, right? Martial arts, it's called a discipline. Right? To discipline is simply to teach. Right? Has very little to do with punishment. Right? Discipline is literally around this idea of imitation. When you disciple someone, you are asking them to imitate you. You guys remember the following truths about children? Children learn what?
Anytime, anywhere, everywhere.
Anytime, anywhere, and everywhere. This was the original truth behind discipline. The idea that children learn, period. That they're sponges. You don't have to talk to a child for them to learn. Because a child's normal, natural instinct is to imitate. Kenji was 3 when one of my higher ground students pointed out that when Kenji stood up, he would do the same thing that I would do with my feet. I have this very weird habit where I do this with my feet. I would do that, and I would swing my hips side to side. I didn't teach that to Kenji. I didn't even notice that he was doing that. It gets funnier because he went to the doctor because he was told that he had a speech impediment. And the teachers were getting worried at pace because they couldn't understand Kenji. We took him to the doctor, and the doctor was like, okay, we got to test him. And then I went in, and the doctor heard me talk. And the doctor was like, no, he doesn't have a speech problem. He's just inheriting his father's accent. True story. He was 4 or 5. He was 4 or 5, yeah. Why? Because it hinges on this truth. Children learn anytime, everywhere, anywhere. They learn all your subtleties. They learn when you don't want them to learn. When you're not trying to teach them, that's the point where they're learning. I had several children over the years, to this day, it happened again just a few months ago, who tell me that the most important thing they learn here is not what we're teaching them. It's watching me and my wife and me interact with my wife, or me interact with Kenji, or me interact with Timmy. That it's possible to have a happy, healthy family. I'm like, what? Where do you get that idea? Why are you learning that? We're not teaching you that. But again, it's what they're watching. So discipline is literally this idea that kids will imitate. And from imitation, they learn new skills. Look at the origin of that word. And that's what you begin to realize. Has nothing to do with punishment. In fact, in the Japanese breakdown of discipline is to teach. To teach. If you were to break it down, the Japanese word, it's teach. The problem is we've equated this form of teaching into punishment, right? But again, if we believe that children learn anytime, anywhere, everywhere, then when we equate punishment to discipline, what are children learning? What are they actually learning when we're punitive, when we're zero tolerance? They learn to cheat, not to get caught. They learned that the best thing to do when you make a mistake is what? What?
Not to get caught.
Not to get caught? Hide it. That's one of the things they learn. What else did they learn? It's part of the cheating. They learn that it's better to just lie than admit the truth. What else do they learn? To do things halfway. To kill effort, and creativity. You become efficient. Yeah, you become, they learn, I love that positive twist, right? To become more efficient.
No, discipline means train the lesson. So like
Train the lesson, yeah.
repeating.
Repeating, teaching, yeah. But right now we're going to what's happening because of the negative connotation of discipline. Go ahead, Andres.
They learn to discipline others for their mistakes.
They learn to do the same thing. I'm going to give you guys an example that plays out in actual data. They did a study, longitudinal study, kids on divergent thinking. Anybody here aware of what divergent thinking is? Who knows what divergent thinking is? Huh? I know you know it. Yeah. Well, what is divergent thinking? Anybody knows? Okay, divergent thinking is a person's ability to problem solve as creative and without constraints as possible. So for example, if I say what are the uses for a paper clip? Tell me your answers.
Coat hanger for mice.
Coat hanger. Pick a lock. What else? What else?
A dart.
A dart. Make a necklace out of them. Come on, we have 4.
A tattoo.
Earrings, tattoo. Fix your jacket. Fishing hook. What else? Obviously to put papers together. What else? That's 9. Create a bracelet. Build figurines. That's 11. Projectile, which is the same as a weapon, but I'll take that as a different answer. That's 12.
Turn it into a compass.
Turn it into a compass. That's 13. Come on, there are at least how many people in this group? We've come up with 13 so far. What else?
A ring. A fishing hook.
Huh? All right, art supplies. Clean the stuff out of your nails. A toothpick. That's 16 so far. That is 16 so far. Huh? Clean your ear. Oh, ow. That is 17.
An aglet.
An anklet, 18.
An aglet.
Oh, aglet.
So your
Yeah, we said that already. Yeah, the shoelace, the end of the shoelace. To pop balloons. An earring. That's 21.
You know, like the thing to get like blackheads?
Oh, that's gross. That's 22. That's 22. All right, so really quickly, we came up, and I'll be generous, this group can probably come up with about 30 uses. An average child, before they go to school, can come up with almost 200. Here's why, divergent thinking. They will ask you, well, how big is the paper clip? What is the material made? Is the paper clip like easy to bend? Because if I can get a giant paper clip, oh my gosh, I can add another 30 crap to add to that. Does the paper clip even have to be, you know, in the shape that it's in? Do we even need to define paper clip as what we know as paper clip? They seem stupid questions, but that's how children think. They're divergent. That's why they're so creative and imaginative. So when they first tested, going back to this study, 95% of the kids tested were geniuses. 95% of kids were geniuses when it came to divergent thinking. Divergent thinking is so important because in the modern world today, what we need are divergent problem solvers. Because every normal idea you have, somebody else can think of it, called an artificial intelligence. A computer can come up with the solutions you guys did. What we need are people who can come up with solutions that haven't been programmed yet. And those are divergent thinkers, out of the box. Why is Higher Ground so strong according to the community? Because we're divergent thinkers. We think out of the box. That is what's needed. So based on this study, when kids, before they go to school, how many of them are geniuses? 95%. They took the same kids. They tested them at, I believe, 6th or 8th grade. It became 50%. They took the same kids. They tested them at 12th grade. The numbers completely flipped. 5% of them remained in the genius category. Why? Because as a result of our punishment, zero tolerance discipline, we kill kids from being creative, from being divergent. Because they realize quickly that when you make a mistake, what happens to you? You get shut down. And bad ideas equals, by Devin, by Stewart, bad ideas equals punishment. Sometimes it's not even bad ideas. Irritating ideas to adults equals punishment. Or even worse, ideas that adults don't understand equals punishment.
I think also time. Back in the day, we had a lot of time to stop and listen to kids, and now we don't have time. We're so busy. We want everything in that microwavable time frame, and so we don't have time to stop and listen to what they, because a lot of them, it takes a long time to get out of their mouth. And you don't have patience, and you're not teaching them in the
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? Like, I think time constraints really.
That is a valid reason. It's the whole idea behind this developmental stages, why we freak out when kids can't read at 3rd grade. You know, there's so many examples out there of people who become very, very successful who were developmentally behind. It doesn't mean they're dumb, but the problem is once you're developmentally behind, what happens to you? You get labeled, and then you create self-destructive identity. Remember that from yesterday? And when you create that self-destructive identity, are you leaving? No. When you create that self-destructive identity, what happens? You live in that reality over and over and over again. So we have kids that are supposed to be geniuses that begin to believe that they're what? They're absolutely dumb. And they're fish trying to climb a tree. I love that example. And they begin to think the monkey is the smartest and most efficient creature because the only test is climbing a tree. And then you add our idea of discipline to that, then they learn very quickly that if they can't climb a tree, they get disciplined. So then you have, like I said, the whole flip on the study. The way we do discipline discourages mistakes. And the problem with discouraging mistakes is simple. Think of every innovation that we have in technology nowadays. Mistakes was made before those came about. Thousands of failures, thousands of mistakes. Mistakes equals innovation. With proper guidance and practice, it equals innovation. Right? But our kids don't see it that way. Like I said, at some point, we find it cute for them to walk and fall, and then at some point, we change that. We punish them for falling down. So this is all part of this whole idea of discipline. Why it's important we really begin to understand what discipline is. Discipline, in its truest sense, is just simply teaching. Right? If you really want to flip everything on its head, we need to teach kids that discipline is just a process. It's a process. Right? And part of that process, because it is a process, is a series of failures and mistakes. And at the end result, while pretty, went through ugly phases. See, this is the problem with our definition of success in our modern society. We only want the end result. We don't take the time discipline. There's so much studies that the most important trait and most determining trait in order for a kid to succeed is grit. Grit involves self-control and self-discipline. This idea that I can imitate, this idea that I can repeat and practice and make mistakes, and I can keep doing that. I can repeatedly make mistakes to make myself better. When you think about martial arts, it's the craziest thing. We practice a move about 1,000 times, and we were taught it a certain way. And after you do it 1,000 times and you feel pretty confident about your throw, your sensei, your coach comes back to you and tells you you're doing it wrong. And then now you have to practice it another 1,000 times a different way. And then your sensei comes back after you've practiced it another 1,000 times and tell you to practice it the exact same way you practiced it the first time. That's only Steve. No, it's not. I've been to other martial arts teachers. And you do it again. And then you realize after already repeating this move 3,000 times that there's a small detail that nobody's ever shown you before. Your wrist is twisting the wrong way. Wish I had learned that the first 1,000 times. You practice it again 1,000 times.
But then you learn how to be disciplined.
But then from that practice, you learned how to repeat things. That it's okay that you're making mistakes. That all of those were not wasted. Because at the end of the day, your sensei don't punish you for doing it wrong. They don't tell you, you suck, quit. What they tell you is, here, change this up a little bit and watch how easier it gets. Here, change this up a little bit more. Watch how easier it gets. They don't tell you, do 1,000 push-ups for doing it wrong. Because again, the idea is that by continually making those mistakes and improving on it, I can get better, right? And the thing about discipline is, requires guidance. Whether that guidance is just the simple fact of imitating somebody, so you have someone you can imitate, or actual direct guidance where you have someone directing and guiding you. It requires guidance. True discipline is not a one-time, you messed up, you suck, therefore clean that up. True discipline is, let me show you what you did wrong, now do it again. And if you didn't get better results, here you go, do it again. See, when you apply this to behavior, it changes the dynamic. Because think about a kid who's disrespectful. And let's take the most common example of being disrespectful. You know, they interrupt you when you're talking. Okay? That's pretty common, right? And how many of our kids, nod your head if you've seen our kids get punished in school for interrupting teachers. It's pretty common. I myself have gotten that. Is it really an issue of respect? Or is it an issue of skill? We don't know until you sit down with a kid. How many adults here interrupt other people when they talk? Are you disrespecting that adult? Was that your intention? Why do you interrupt them?
Excitement.
Excitement? You know the answer? Right? I mean, come on, let's be real. How many of you have interrupted somebody? Did you mean that as disrespectful? No. But really, what's missing here is the lack of self-control. That child doesn't know to wait. They don't know how to wait. It's a simple waiting game. You wait till it's your turn to talk. They have no patience. They have no impulse control. Right? So when you punish them for interrupting you, what skill did they learn? Do they? Have we seen our kids who get punished for this? Have we seen them learn the skill of self-control from that? No, because there is no direct correlation to a kid being punished to that and not talking. So really, what's the solution there if we were to truly discipline them? Interrupt them.
Point it out to them.
Point it out to them. Point the behavior out and teach them a different way. You teach them a different way. All right? It's very rude to interrupt. Don't interrupt people. When you want to say something, here's what you do. But I'm going to forget it. Write it on a piece of paper. And then when it's your turn, say it out. You give them new skills. The problem with discipline is it takes time. And here's the deal. Are they going to be able to do that overnight? No, they're probably going to interrupt the crap out of you for the next 3 years. But then slowly and slowly and slowly, what happens? They learn skills. Here's the deal. They can learn skills. Everybody can. It's our ability to teach those skills that matters. Right? So again, when you put discipline into behavior, then you begin to realize that since children can learn anytime, anywhere, here's another way. They watch adults interrupt each other all the time. Kids imitate. You know, it's funny. This is what I tell people all the time. You keep telling a kid to listen. Listen, listen, listen. Do you listen? How are they going to learn to listen if they have no model of listening? They don't know how to listen because you've never listened to them. Parents hate it when I say that. They want it in the moment. They want something easy. Right? The problem with punishment is this is often dependent on who?
The discipliner.
Dependent on the adult. Yes, the discipliner. Think about how many times you've been disciplined and think about of why you were really disciplined. It was to make the adult's job easier. I've done it as a parent. Shut up, Kenji. Why? Because I have a headache. You're annoying me. It just keeps going anyway. Or you're trying to sleep. Right, I'm trying to sleep. And you keep talking. There's really no other reason for punishing them other than the adult. It's the same thing in a classroom. I'm going to kick you out of the classroom. Why? Because it makes my life easier. Think about suspension, how stupid that concept is. It's the dumbest concept in the world, to suspend kids from... Here's a kid who is probably already behind on the learning curve. And that's why they're interrupting and exhibiting some of the behaviors, because they're frustrated. And your solution to it is what? Kick them out of your class. How is that helping the kid? Does it? Does it? It makes an example. But again, that's what? Adult-centric. It makes it easier for the teacher. I don't blame them. I'm not saying this to blame them. I'm saying there is something wrong with the way we view discipline. This is why, and again, evidence and data has shown this. Consequently, what has our zero tolerance done? Has it improved their education? No. It simply made it worse because punishment is dependent on adult. True discipline bye, guys. It's all the Vistas leaving. Bye, guys. True discipline is about the child and learning. I'll give you guys a common example that I give parents. Your child is young and they jump off a table. What's the typical reaction? Don't do that again. They get spanked. Sometimes they'll get hurt, and then you spank them on addition of them getting hurt. Come on, this is a common example. I know you've at least seen this. Right? Because the child is 4 or 5, and what do they want to do? They want to jump. They want to fly. They want to explore. They want to see what their bodies can do. In essence, what do you teach that child? Fear. Don't do it. You're going to hurt yourself. And then we wonder why when they become adults, they're scared of everything. Well, hello. You've only programmed them to be afraid of everything. Don't do that. If we were to really discipline them, what would you do? Let's see.
Jump off the table, get hurt.
Jump off the table, get hurt. Well, there's a natural consequence. There is certain truth to that. That is part of discipline.
Show them a video of a child jumping off the table and getting hurt.
That's fear.
PowerPoint, Rima.
Teach them. Wait. What was that?
Pillows so they'll have a safe landing, so teach them how to have safe landing so they can think on their own.
Teach them safety. Hey, if you're going to jump, remember the following things. The higher it goes, the harder it hits. So if you want to really jump, don't jump off of high places. Or put pillows and then jump. And then teach them how to land. Teach them how to jump. Right? And then what happens? That child learns their own limits. And then when they get hurt because they didn't listen to you, guess what? That's natural consequences. That's natural. It's what happens. That's why I told you, don't jump a certain height. So when you jump that again, this time I want you to be smarter. In essence, what are you teaching your child? You're teaching your child several things at that point. I know it sounds ridiculously simple, but this is the truth. The first one is what? You're teaching them to think safety on their own. What's the second one? Critical thinking. How to resolve when there's risks. What else are you teaching them? That it's okay to explore your limits. That it's absolutely okay. Go ahead. But just remember that certain limits have consequences. Whereas the other one is you punish them for jumping. What do you teach them? Be afraid. Right? So again, discipline is about the child and the learning. The problem with discipline is it takes time, and sometimes you don't have that time. This is why discipline should never have been done by us or the school system. Where should have discipline happen? At home.
But if they don't spend as much time at home, how can it happen?
Well, that's why I'm saying.
Why would you say not in school?
Because traditionally, ideally, they should already have certain sense of discipline and basic standards by the time they go to school. Teachers should just worry about the academics. That's what our education system is designed to do. Teachers don't know social emotional learning. They don't know executive functions. They don't know half the crap we're learning. So how can they teach values? We're putting the job on teachers for 25 kids. Jesus. Have you ever tried parenting 25 kids? Have you ever tried parenting 5 kids? Yeah, that's my point. It's impossible. Because discipline takes time. Discipline takes a lot of time. That's why it's one-on-one. It happens in small groups, small settings. It's hard to teach discipline in a gigantic setting. Right? So it's important that we understand that. When discipline comes, right, discipline is value-centric. So there's values, and then there's rules. Right? True discipline is value-centric. What does value mean? What is a value?
What it's worth.
It's worth. What else? What does values mean?
Something important to you.
It's worth importance. Not necessarily just to you, but in this situation, in the society or community or the group. What else is values? Huh? Can we put there? They're your moral standards. These are the actions by which it's acceptable to the community. Right?
Expectations be more roles or values?
No, expectations are absolutely values. It's expectations. Expectations for what? Expectations for what?
It could just anything, I mean, like, expectations of what you expect them to live up to as a child.
Expectations of behavior.
I don't know.
No, that's perfectly correct. Values are the expectations for behavior. What are rules? What are rules? What was that? Generally taught at birth. But what are they? Like, what exactly are they? They're a list of what? Do's and don'ts. Rules are a list of do's and don'ts. Do this, don't do this. Why? Why do rules exist? Control.
To ensure structure.
Structure.
Safety.
Safety. Risk management. Now, absolutely, there's a place for rules. I'm not saying no rules. Okay, but when it comes to discipline, this should be the focus. Because here's the deal. When you do do's and don'ts in a classroom, what happens? As an adult, when you're told not to touch something, what do you want to do?
Not touch.
You're one of the few. But for most adults, what do you want to do? You want to see what happens. It may not be you. You want to see somebody else do it.
Manipulate someone else to
Yeah, it's a reality. You're curious. Now, maybe not all adults.
Speed limit, I mean, that's like
Yeah.
45.
It says limit. You ain't limited me.
You ain't limiting me, right? So there's a certain degree of you want to test it out. Do you necessarily understand why the rules exist? No, because do the other people understand the risk management part? No, it's the adults who see the risk, not the kids. Right? Do the kids see the structure part? Not really, it's the adults who see the structure. This is mostly adult-centric, again. Do's and don'ts. Do this, don't do this, do this, don't do this. Well, why? It's kind of like the greatest thing about the fallacy in martial arts. Everything you learn as a white belt not to do, when you become a black belt, what do you learn?
It's okay.
It's okay to do them, as long as you know exactly how to do them. Yeah. Don't do this. Don't do this. And you grow up in martial arts not knowing why you're not supposed to do it. And then you see every black belt that you're training with doing it. It drives you crazy. Why the heck are they doing it? They just told me never to do that. And then the reason they give is What's the reason they give? Because we're black belts. Yeah, we're black belts. We can do this. And then you become a black belt and you realize, okay, now I get it. Right? It's the same thing with rules. Really, kids don't understand why those exist. They just know don't do it. And then they watch adults do it. Don't go there as the adult is standing there. God dang it, don't cuss. Don't bully. Yeah, don't bully people, otherwise when you come home, I'm going to punch you. Come on, that's a really common example. And that's a very truthful example. You hurt your little sister, I will hurt you. What? You tell your kid not to do violence, and it's to do violence back to them?
That's how we were taught. So for example, my cousin used to bite everybody all the time. So they told us to bite her back so that she would see how it felt.
Fair enough.
I mean, but it didn't work.
Yeah.
But that's what we were taught to do.
Now she has rabies. Right, but again, think about the ridiculousness of adults, us as adults. Quit yelling! Don't yell! You just did it.
Use your quiet voice.
Okay, use your quiet voice. Right? That's how rules exist. Right? Because so for us, true discipline comes when we teach them the value. Why are we doing this? That's why here, right? Respect and honor. What does it mean? How do you want to be treated? Would you like me to treat you the way you treat me? No. They recognize it. It's the funniest conversation I have with kids all the time. Blankety blank. We'll put in the name of a child there. Would you like me to act like you during class? No. Why not? Because it's not fair. What? Right? So then why do you act that way? I don't know. How many of you had that conversation with a kid? Right? I don't know. Okay. Well, let's not act that way. Let's act differently. And you teach them a different behavior. That takes time. Time that some of us don't have. Right? But that is true discipline. Right? When you discipline kids, right, you don't castigate them for their nature. Instead, you teach them appropriate ways to control their own nature. I am forgetful as heck. I got punished every time I lost something. I would lose pencils, lunch boxes, watches, papers for homework. I am a scattered brain. And every day I would go home, I would get scared because I knew I lost something. And I got punished for it. Eventually, I started stealing what I lost, in the hopes that my parents wouldn't recognize that it's a different lunchbox that I brought home today. That's literally what I did all my life. Yeah, I compromised. Right? I never actually, my forgetfulness never went away. Until one day, I read about my symptoms. Because, you know, I was diagnosed with a mild form of autism and ADHD. Well, not mild ADHD, mild autism and severe ADHD. And I realized, oh, this is what I have. That's why I'm so forgetful. Now I know what this means. And on that same place that I learned it, a teacher taught me what she does. I have a list for everything. I was about freshman in high school when this teacher came around. I have a list for everything. I have a checklist for everything. Before I leave the house, I check my checklist. Before I leave any place, I check my checklist. Check my pockets. I check everything. Right? And I do that. And then the moment I get home, I do the exact same routine. I take off this, I take off that, and I have a junk thing, like a junk drawer where I put everything. And you know what? Am I still forgetful? Absolutely. But do I lose as much stuff as I used to? No. Every once in a while, I leave something, and usually I end up leaving it because I broke from my system. But because of that teacher, I learned. My parents have been trying to get me to be responsible for years, up until that freshman year. For years, I never learned it. All I learned is that if I lose something, I get spanked. But this teacher taught me something that became very valuable, that to this day, I'm 30 years old, I'm still using that same skill to cope with my forgetfulness. And the understanding that it's okay to be forgetful. That's who I am. So you know what? Kenji is just as flipping forgetful as me. Now, there is a part of me, because it's so much easier to just yell at him. Why did you forget this, dumb little boy? There is a part of me that wants to do that. There is a part of me that sometimes that comes out, where I get mad at him. Seriously? His homework. Seriously, you forgot it? Why would you forget it? I don't know. I was in a rush. I got excited to go to the playground. Oh, I'm sorry. And then he started crying one day, and I realized, oh my God, I'm not teaching him anything. I'm just making him feel guilty for being forgetful. So I started teaching him, and I've been trying to teach him, okay, Kenji, when we get home, what do? Put everything away right away. Okay. So we've been doing this for at least the last few months.
Even for his Christmas gift, we were talking like, okay, I want to get him a GoPro because he loves taking videos and stuff, but I don't want to buy it because he'll lose it.
Yeah, he'll lose it.
Or a camera, or...
So we told him, hey, if you learn to put your stuff away right away, you will get better things. It's a value. Right? He understands why it's so important to remember things. Right? He understands what is acceptable. It's not acceptable that I'm going to higher ground in the middle of the night to grab your homework. That is not acceptable. Will I do it? Yes. But you know what? You are coming in the car with me. This is called natural consequence. Come in the car with me, and now we are staying up till 11:30 at night for you to do your homework. But in that process, he's not learning to hate himself for being forgetful. I hated myself for being forgetful. And it's something that I really couldn't do. I was mentally not capable of remembering short-term things. Just couldn't. I get distracted too easily. Right? So, again, discipline is really about not castigating them for their nature. Kids are hyper. Have you found a kid who's not hyper? Well, yeah, I guess there are some kids who are not hyper. But most kids are what? What do they want to do? They want to run around. Right? Why are we forcing them to stop doing that? That is their nature. Kids are supposed to be energy balls. They're supposed to bounce around. Right? So instead of castigating them for their nature and telling them you're a terrible human being for not being able to sit still, what do? We teach them appropriate ways to control their nature. That's why we do breathing exercises. It's like being angry. Is being angry normal? Yes. So why do we castigate kids when they get angry? We tell them all the time, don't get mad. Show me your happy face. They're not happy. Seriously. How would you as an adult feel if somebody did that to you? When you're pissed off? They do, right? And how does that make you feel? Hi, Kenji boy. We did not forget you. Is that why you're looking at me that way?
My dad's like a short Asian guy who looks like 18.
With what?
That looks like 18.
You're a short Asian guy that looks 18.
Why would you tell your friend that?
They do look like that.
Because I do look like that. Well, thank you. Well, well, the one who picked you up isn't short. Well, he can pass for Asian. But again, right, going back to that example, right? So again, these are just simple things. Anger is not bad. It's a normal human reaction. But instead of teaching them how to deal with that anger, what do we do with it? We make them what? More angry. Or we tell them to stop. Can you stop being angry? Let me ask you guys as adults. When you're angry, do you just stop being angry?
You want a good reason to be angry?
Yeah. No, right? So instead of castigating them for their nature, what should you do? Teach them how to manage their anger. You're angry? Okay. Let me teach you how to manage your anger. Let me teach you some breathing exercises. Let me teach you how to journal. Let me teach you boxing. Let me teach you how to do this. Let me teach you X, Y, Z. And then let me tell you what is appropriate. It is not appropriate to hit someone because you're angry. Otherwise, I'll hit you. Right? But it's not appropriate. So what is appropriate? It is appropriate to use your words properly, not cuss at them. And it's absolutely appropriate to hit something, like a punching bag, without destroying property. You give them ways to deal with that anger. You don't tell them, oh, you're a very angry child, you're terrible. Because when you tell them that, what happens to them? What do they think of themselves constantly? There's something wrong with me because I'm angry. There's something wrong with me because I'm angry. There's something wrong with me because I'm angry. And then they grow up to be adults who continually think, what is wrong with me? Why am I always angry? What is wrong with me? It's like kids with depression who feel sad. What's wrong with me? I'm always sad. There's nothing wrong with you. You just need to learn new skills. Right? So when we begin to understand this, we begin to realize, therefore, that discipline, is it a negative thing? Is discipline a negative thing?
No.
No, absolutely not. Right? Discipline, right, is the most important process in learning. This is done through imitation, natural and logical consequences, object lessons, and much like any skill, guided repetition. Because behaviors are learned. When you think of behaviors like basketball, you realize that if they don't know how to shoot, is that a problem? If they don't know how to shoot, is that a problem?
Kind of.
Kind of. And what do?
Teach them.
You teach them. You don't yell at them for not knowing how. And if they're traveling because they don't know how to dribble, what do? You teach them to dribble. You bench them? Yeah, that's a terrible coach. Right? That's most coaches, right? That's most parents too. You know what ruins youth sports? Coaches and parents, the adults. And again, the adults, right? And then object lessons, right? You role play with them. You teach them. Or the other one is guided repetition or practice. Behaviors are just like anything else. They're skills. When a child, for the most part, is misbehaving, they lack a certain skill. Whether it's a skill of self-control, skill of patience, skill of proper communication, whatever skill it is, there is a skill they're lacking. And so when you begin to discipline them, then guess what happens? They're bound to change that behavior. Now, just like any skill, what's the caveat? What's the most difficult part in learning a skill? Those of you that have coached before, huh? Time. And time to undo bad habits. Right? So when you put discipline, the problem with discipline is it takes time, and also you have to unlearn bad habits. So when you think of a child that you are getting and they have a misbehavior, what's the problem in our line of work? What's our real problem? Huh? The turnover is constantly changing. You don't get enough time to really work with a child. What else? What else is the other problem? They're constantly learning what?
Bad habits.
They're constantly learning bad habits. So you're constantly having to do what? You're constantly having to undo bad habits.
Well, that's what happens to us, because on the weekends, they go back home. So they learn a new habit Monday through Friday, and they go home, and then on Monday, they've forgotten that new habit that they've learned, and they've regressed back to that habit they've been doing.
How many of you who's worked long enough with kids absolutely hate the winter break and the summer break? Why?
Because you have to start from ground zero.
Because you start from ground zero. I mean, that's reality. You have to start ground zero, right? Because again, it goes back to this time and undoing bad habits. So it took you so long to teach them a new habit, and then they reset all that habit, and on top of that, they learn new bad habits.
I was gonna say, you're teaching them new skills that the school is teaching a different skill, and home is teaching a different skill.
Mhm.
You've got multiple new skills. The kid can only handle what they want to do right now, and they don't really care what skills you want them to learn, or they're trying to learn 17 others.
Mhm.
They go home and unlearn all of them.
Absolutely correct. Right, this is the challenge in our work. But somebody's got to do it. I mean, that's reality. Somebody's got to do it. We have to do this. Because if all we're doing with kids is the same punishment that they're getting everywhere else, what are we offering? Not outside of the box. Right? This is why our work is so much more difficult and challenging. Because this is what our mission is supposed to be. And that's why it's important we understand the social philosophy and mission. If our mission was just to keep kids safe, we can absolutely just go straight up punishment. We can be a boot camp. And my God, that is so much easier. Trust me, I've done it. It is so much easier to do it. Yell at them. Do 100 push-ups every time you make a mistake. But unfortunately, that's not our mission, right? Can it be? I know, right? Can we change it? Instead of mile deep and inch wide, can we just go inch deep, mile wide? Man, oh man. You know, but that's, again, that's not who we are. The other problematic part in this is consequences. Consequences are important. This is the whole nurture, right? Coddling, the whole coddling, right, versus discipline. Because the opposite of discipline is coddling, right? This is the opposite of discipline. You don't teach them, and instead, you protect them from consequences. How many of you found parents like that? They will defend their kid. And they will make sure that their kid doesn't get the appropriate consequence for what they did. That produces the exact same problem as punishment. Because what does the kid realize?
You can get
He can get away with anything. That society is okay with him getting away with anything. Is that the truth? No. For the top 1% it is. Yes, maybe that's true. But we're not here for social justice issues, though. All right? We are here for our work. All right? But in reality, right, that is not how the world works. So up until they're in college, you have helicopter parents who do everything for them. And then they get out of college, and now you have parents that even call work. Why did you fire my kid? This is a reality, by the way. Why did you fire my kid? They're 25 and they need to know what the crap they're doing.
When I worked at Fry's, they would have like other baggers call, their mom would call in, like, my son's so sick.
Yeah.
I'm still in high school and I don't do that.
Hey, exactly. But again, there is this whole idea of coddling where you protect your kids from consequences. This is such a big problem that colleges, universities in the United States have now created an entirely new department just to deal with parents. I'm not joking. This is the opposite. Because again, we've created such a negative connotation and discipline. Parents now are doing the exact opposite, where they're coddling and they're protecting their kids from the consequence. And the result is still the same. The result is still the same. These kids have learned behaviors, learned destructive behaviors. In fact, there's so many studies that show that it is worse to have a helicopter parent than no parents at all. Several studies that show that it's better to have no parents than have a helicopter parent. You do the exact same thing, except now you don't feel any sort of social or community responsibility. And you end up creating a child who is very, very, very dependent. Right? And so this is also a problem. So what should we do when it comes to consequences? When you want to teach a child, you then let the consequences happen with learning. It's what we do in jiu-jitsu. You don't learn to protect your neck, what's going to happen? You're going to get choked out. We're not going to protect you during sparring. Now, there is a way out. You tap. But again, right, it's a consequence. You don't jump in there as the coach, oh, no, 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 don't tap my kid out. No, I want them to learn. You straighten your arm, you get armbarred. Natural consequence. Now, again, these are natural consequences. Either natural or logical. Why does this matter? Why does the natural and logical part matter?
Because it has to make sense to whatever they did.
It has to make sense to whatever they did. It's like the whole consequence of cleaning. That's a terrible consequence unless they made trash. Cleaning should not be seen as a consequence or a punishment. Cleaning should just be part of contributing to the community. So when a kid misbehaves and you tell them, because you misbehaved, now you're going to have to do community service and clean the place, what do they connote it to? Oh, cleaning is terrible. It's bad. I don't want to clean. No, don't do that. Right? It's a terrible consequence. You let them have natural consequences. Now, if they're the ones who trash the bathroom, guess what you need to do? Haha, that's not our custodian's job. That is now your job. Thank you for trashing up our bathroom. Now go clean it. Right, go clean it. Natural consequence. Well, you know what? You did X, Y, Z. Consequence of that is X, Y, Z. You got hurt because you weren't paying attention. You don't laugh at them. I mean, laugh at them in the inside. But don't show that. But you absolutely explain it to them. Hey, why did you get hurt? Because I did what I'm not supposed to do. Okay, don't do it again. Yeah, don't save them from it. Yeah, don't scream at them. Right? Don't punish them on top of the natural consequence. Let the consequence happen. It's the same thing we do with kids. Fine, you don't want to do your homework? Natural consequence. you're going to fail. Right? The problem is then their parents come and defend them and negotiate the grades. Right? But that's part of the problem. Natural consequences are important. Natural and logical consequences are important. If you don't give a child a natural or logical consequence, they learn that they don't need to be responsible for their actions. So whenever you see a behavior, name it, and then let the consequence happen. Don't save them from that consequence. Right? This is also part, all right, when do we use punishment? Is there a need for punishment?
Yes.
Yes or no? Absolutely. When is punishment necessary?
When you break a law.
When you are a danger. When they are a danger to society. Right, at some point, if the repeated consequence doesn't work, well, yeah, now they go to jail. Or now there's a punishment that's involved in it. Right? Sometimes it's inevitable. All right? If we didn't live in a free society, then maybe. But living in a free society, there has to be times where this exists. The second part is when else is it necessary? Remember, this is values-based. When values remain misunderstood. So values remain misunderstood. You see this all the time. They just laugh at it. They don't care. For the values. Not that they don't care. Because remember what we said yesterday. Right? They don't care for the values. So at that point, natural consequences aren't enough. Logical, because they're obviously not understanding it. Right, but the thing about it is as adults, we go straight here. For the most part, that's where we go. We either go straight there or we go straight to coddling. Again, it goes back to that whole love and character. We go one extreme. As higher ground, we need to understand that we have to play both of them at once. Coddle kids, but we absolutely shouldn't punish them. We should discipline them. We should teach them. We should have them imitate what we're doing. We should show them what behaviors are. We should teach them skills. We should teach them self-management, self-control. We should teach them coping skills. Because when they do, it becomes powerful. Right? Now, here's the other thing. With discipline, true discipline always keeps the relationship intact. Why does this matter? Why do I say that true discipline always keeps the relationship intact?
Every child craves discipline.
Every child craves discipline. Every child wants to learn. They do. The problem is, when you discipline them and you don't keep the relationship intact, what happens? What was that? Somebody said it. Oh, was that Kenji? Okay, what did you say? Then they begin to hate learning. That's from a little kid. But that's the truth. Why are you speaking, little boy? This is an adult conversation. No, I'm kidding, Kenji. Right, but again, right? if you don't keep the relationship intact, right, when you give a consequence and you don't help them understand that this is for them, what happens? They shut down. They hate you. So you want to keep the relationship intact. One of the absolute things that you want to do is when you discipline a child in a form of a consequence, you want to talk to them after. You want to make sure the next day that they can still go to you. Have you guys ever noticed that when most of our kids who are really invested in us, when they do something wrong, what do?
Confess.
They confess or they hide it and they avoid you. We all know this one student, when she's doing something, we all know how it manifests. She doesn't come to my office, and she doesn't come to certain people. And she will absolutely avoid doing things. Yeah. Right? But again, right, if this is the response of children, then they miss out on learning. This is why this is so important that even like Ray, our driver, they need to understand this. You need to understand this too. Because every adult at Higher Ground will play a role in this. Kids need a rebound adult. Think about your childhood. You had a rebound adult. These are the adults, people you built a relationship with, that when your parents disciplined you, what did you do? You cried to them. If they were a good adult, what did they do? They reinforced what you learned from your parents, but they listened to you. And then you realize there is no getting away from learning this skill. Right? They're all in cahoots. They're all talking to each other. But that is healthy. They're trying to set me up. But that's important in this community. Because see, kids, they need to understand that relationship part. They need to understand that no matter how much mistakes they make, even if the adult disciplined them, guess what? It does not mean that they're cut off from that relationship. It means that they can keep coming back, coming back, coming back. And you create a safe emotional environment. And you create kids that are willing to learn over and over and over. That's why this is the other thing. When you are angry, don't discipline a child. If that child made you angry, it is better for you to calm yourself down, don't deal with the situation, and have somebody else in the community do it. Why? Because when you're angry, what do you tend to do with the relationship? You cut it off. And you take it personal. And it goes back to our whole idea. Children are not projects. Don't take it personal. Even as a parent, I tell this to parents. Avoid disciplining your child when you are angry. Because chances are, number one, you will go to punishment. Number two, you will cut that relationship off. Now, as last part of this, can discipline always happen? No. Not every moment, and this is very important, not every moment is a teaching tool. Is a teaching moment. All right? Not every moment is a moment to explain to the child why you shouldn't answer back and go through the respect and honor. Not every moment. There are moments when it just needs to be structure and rules. Right? When are those moments? Name some of those moments.
Danger.
When there is danger. That is not teaching time. Don't do that because you will break your arm. I don't need to explain it to you.
Don't lick the plug.
Don't lick the plug. Yes, that is not a teaching time. You are a danger to the outlet. Not to you. I don't care about you. Right? Not every moment is it. When else is it inappropriate to discipline? and it's more appropriate to just go with straightforward rule and not go through the process of imitation and explaining values. Come on, it's the simplest one. When there's like 20 or 30 of them, and you are the only teacher, that is not the time to provide discipline. That is the time to go with blanket rules. Here's what's happening in our classroom. All right, I need you to be quiet when I am talking. Hopefully, you've already established the values prior to that, yeah, right? Because that's what we believed, right? But at that point, it's not time for this. It's not time to, Mr. So-and-so, do you understand that by doing that, you're disrespecting the rest of the class, as the rest of the class is like throwing papers, right? That is not the time. That's why for us here, what do we have designed? We have one person who can do that. We have an RTE team. Hey, RTE team, I need you to deal with this, right? So that they can do the discipline. All right? So, questions about this part? Because now that we know this, then we can go to de-escalation. Right? Now that we understand this. Questions, comments, things that you don't like. When Fernando's mean to you? I think that's a natural consequence. I think there is a value that you are breaking. Well, if that friend is constantly being mean to you, I think at that point you have to reevaluate. you have to evaluate your choice of friends, Rima. You chose to sit with him. You know his nature. Yeah. Questions? No questions? No comments? No violent reactions? Outside of these two? All right. We will take a 5-minute break, and then we will come back, and we will actually give you guys role plays. Oh, so we will figure out what again, repeated suspension for not doing adult directives. A child lives with grandmother. Okay, child has been removed from the system. Oh, removed from home by the system and placed with grandmother. Child has accused stepfather of molestation. All right, this is a she. Second grade. So she was accusing them when she was younger, and she got removed from home when she was in kinder. Child bullies other kids. And does not like big groups. No siblings. However, lives with grandma with other cousins. Grandma with other cousins.
Is mom in the picture? Does she have visitation?
We don't know. Likes. Child likes to be in control. So child likes things that allows her to direct other children, or activities that allow her to be the one in control. Child likes to draw. And child dislikes male authority. Join, which one is the smallest group? Join that group in the back with Quentin and Oscar. All right, so again, are there any questions? All right. No, we're just do the two children. All right, so again, you need to come up, understanding discipline. All right, you need to come up with a plan of action of what you will do, not necessarily a solution, all right, of what you will do to figure out what to do with these two kids.
We have them in higher ground?
Yes. All right. Go.
You know, I said, go, look at you. And pushing kids. Stop and turn, and then Smash walks out. Stop being stupid. Child B. Well, listen. Well, like this. And bullying kids. Well, stop, stupid.
Yeah, but remember, they don't know how. The point is to teach them skills. You guys have 10 minutes to come up with a solution. Everybody, inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale. One more time. Inhale, exhale. All right. Who wants to share first? All right, Issa's group.
Okay. So we are starting. Do you want me to stand up? No, okay. So we started with the second grade female, the second situation, the second scenario, whatever. And we figured we'd start with checking behavioral health records first, or that if she isn't enrolled in La Frontera Behavioral Health, we check that first. And then, since the child has had such a traumatic experience so young, we want to stick with the pyramid. Safe environment, supportive environment, and blah, blah, blah. So we're going to start with mapping and testing with a female, since male will trigger her, to make sure that she feels safe, that she's in a good place, making sure we're welcoming her, and then we want to meet with grandma to see if the story is consistent from what we're getting from her. Meeting with the school to make sure that all parties are on the same page, when we move to supportive, we wanna make sure that if she does need counseling, whatever she's doing with La Frontera, let's say she's in La Frontera, that she can do counseling or whatever she needs here at Higher Ground. And then we want to get in contact with the school. We're saying she goes to Hollinger. So if she does have a male teacher, which could be a #1 escalator, moving her from that class, or maybe she sits next to a strong personality who happens to be male, or whatever the case may be, so that we can figure out a trigger, so that we can all be on the same page. And then we want to look at recs for her. Throwing her into jiu-jitsu might not be the best idea for her to start if we haven't earned that trust yet. So we do have the mindfulness room, so we want to start her off in there for first rec, so that she is comfortable, has a space that's just her own with a female to build that relationship. And then for second, we were thinking art, because she likes to draw, giving her that outlet, because just hanging out isn't necessarily an outlet. And then after that, we want to work on goal setting and having like an RTE mapping plan for the future, so that we can see by semester or quarter or yearly how her growth has changed, so we can tweak the plan if we need to, or keep it.
So quick question, how are you addressing the behavior towards men?
So we want to keep her with females right now, so she can build healthy relationships, and then modeling how the RTE member will talk to men or talk to the male students.
We'll kind of like make a growth chart. So RTE will do that, and they'll have, okay, by this time, she'll be able to talk to a male. But we're thinking that safe environment is going to be key before we move up the pyramid.
All right. Any questions or comments to the group? Or disagreements? All right. Who wants to go next?
No.
What do you mean no?
Huh?
She wants to wait till last for that.
Yeah.
We're going. Okay, so we're gonna do child A, the 7th grade male, because we said the same thing for the other child that they did.
Yeah,
We did. Like, the only difference.
Okay, focus. Back to child A.
So we said, kind of for the walking out of class part of it, we really said probably not keeping the kid locked down in one place is not probably the best thing to do. So have him shadow male staff, and it also helps that part of having a positive male role model, because all of his male role models have dropped out of school, been arrested, blah, whatever the story is. So it gives him that positive male role model. And with that, he could do basketball as a rec, or have that one-on-one time be a basketball time with that male staff that he's with. And then we said with him kind of saying that school is pointless and the teachers don't care about him, we really said, since he likes to cut hair, to start talking to him about the possibility of going to like barber school after he gets done with school, and the responsibilities that come with that. So having to be able to do like basic math so he can run his own business if he wanted to do that. So really start doing goal setting with him. And then part of it that we also said, we did a to-do list, was trying to find out his math level. So have someone like test him and really see if maybe that's the issue he's having with his math class. Is it his math level, or is it maybe that it's a female teacher in the class, and maybe seeing about that. And then we also said, as that male role model is building that relationship with him, to have him start discussing why he's pushing the kids in the holler. Is it just because they're bullying him, and maybe it's his lashing out on other kids, or anything like that, and trying to get to the real reason why he's pushing kids.
Same question I asked them. How are you guys planning to address the other behavior with the females?
By basketball, since our basketball coach is a female, and she's really good at relationship building, especially with the middle school students, that would start to develop that relationship.
All right. Questions to the group? Comments? Disagreements?
Where's dad? Did you say where dad was at, or you just said mother's?
Just mother's the only
Did you find out where dad was at?
No, we did not.
All right, next group. Christina?
Okay, so we also did child A, child A. So we thought that, taking, how this person acts, he's probably really closed off for the fact that, he has outbursts. And the fact that like, if something doesn't go his way, instead of like, asking for help, he just walks away. So he's probably not the most person able to just talk. So we said doing like a one-on-one, with not just a male or female, just somebody that he trusts the most, the program. And just because, I mean, obviously he has issues with, female authority, but he also has 3 older brothers, and judging by, I mean, assuming from the fact that he pushes kids in the hallways, that's how probably how he interacts with his brothers. So if he's bullying other kids, he might be getting bullied by his brothers. So maybe a male staff may not, only a male staff might not just be the best for that situation. So just whoever he trusts, getting that staff member that he trusts to open up to him first, showing like a sign of vulnerability, like so like he can trust them. So just asking them, hey, how's this? Just opening yourself up. We also said that after that, getting him to kind of talk about how school going, and then putting him in obviously basketball as a rec. But after a while, after getting that relationship, since he does like sports, then he's probably good at goal setting. So be able to sit down with him and say, okay, your behavior in math, you're just shouting stuff out. Is it because you don't understand it, or because you're bored and you need to be higher? Or in classes that you're walking out, is it because also you're bored and you're getting frustrated, or what is it? So coming up with a plan. Okay, at school, instead of, I'm going to ask for help at this amount of times, or instead of walking out, I'm going to try to raise my hand and ask for help. Same thing with math. Instead of out, just saying stuff, maybe kind of same kind of thing. So just putting goals for him to do, and so he can do it on his own. He kind of goes through it over to not do that and push people around.
Good. Questions to the group? No? Comments? Who wants to go next? Okay, you guys are going.
So, I mean, we're going to be doing child aid too, and pretty much the same thing, but then our focus is to see what's the priority for, like, what to work on. And what we came up was that his brothers are dropped out, they didn't go to school, and one of them is shooting and everything. So we figured that would be a priority. Make him stay away from that, save that, and a helicopter. So our first goal was to kind of remind him how important to finish at least middle school, and then to kind of teach him the importance by like consequences of it. So, but then at higher down, we need to kind of, I say like, it doesn't really matter if he trusts us or not, but I thought it's better to kind of show him the consequences of his actions, so make him like realize what he needs to be doing, for future. So like, he likes basketball, so maybe we'll just encourage him to play basketball. And okay, so if you want to go to NBA, what you have to do, you have to play in high school, and maybe you can go to college, and then you can play NBA and all that. So just like kind of use that basketball as his motivation to finish school, and then like eventually go to high school and then go to college, kind of stuff. And we didn't really plan like how we treat him here, but just mainly like teach him consequences and risks.
Questions to the group? No? All right, who wants to go next? Investments.
We also did student A and for our action plan. Really didn't assume that he was part of the program, so the first thing we do was perform an interview with him and figure out if he has any goals, if he has vision, if he has any passions outside of the things that he likes. One thing that we did want to focus on is modeling like appropriate adult interactions, considering that mom's barely present, works multiple jobs, and his brothers may not be the best influence on him. So modeling that through one-on-ones with male staff, excuse me. And then connecting with his likes and interests, exposing him to different things. So if it's basketball, connecting with a coach, someone who's in the community that works with maybe youth, and maybe get him into camps or different things, expose him to that particular lifestyle, if it's hair, connecting with barbers, or showing him what it takes. And we discussed like really hammering down the point, because he made the comments that school is pointless, and considering that he has 2 dropped out brothers and one who possibly could also be dropped out of school, that may just be the lifestyle or the things that he understands, not trying to change his culture completely, but showing him that there are other options through exposing him to the different things that he has likes or passions for. Setting up small attainable goals with him, because we don't know if, again, he's walking out of class because of frustration, if he's pushing kids in the hallway because he's frustrated, or if that's what's modeled at home. Yelling in the math class, that could be because he's frustrated, because he's bored, because he's looking for attention, because he may not be getting it at home. So figuring out what we'll do in that particular aspect, and that's about as far as we got. But I can see that.
Did you touch on like the part where we wanted to try to find out what's important to him? Because school might not be one. School might not be most important, but yeah, we really wanted to hone in on the fact, like what his values were, and if they could possibly be like distorted by values, like maybe not the best values. So like, you don't want to basically tell him that his values are wrong and that he has to fix them, but basically a way to channel what he finds important into something positive.
Very good. Questions?
How are you going to find out his values? That's my biggest question.
Well, interviews.
Oh, I think that's really good, because it's like finding, like you said, he might not have the, like positive values, but helping him find the steps to those positive values and adding them to his values already. I think that really goes with our one of the lessons that today was the kids, so we don't listen to them. And so finding out what his values are, maybe it is in college. And a lot of times we push that college, okay, so then what is that value? And then finding the steps and listening to him instead of putting our own, like, this is what your value should be. So I think the steps of finding out that value is really,
it's more about him finding out his own.
Who he is.
Because, because you can tell a kid, like the same with math, like we're talking about, we don't want to just tell him like, math is cool, it's fun, you can do it, because he's not going to care. Like, go try to relate to him and listen to why he thinks math sucks so hard, and then use that in a way that like it's related to other things.
Because maybe what he wants to do when he grows up just needs basic math. He doesn't need to do all the crazy math, and so here we'll be pushing him. No, you got to do crazy math when all he needs is addition, because his goal in life is just to be, whatever, So I think that was key.
Christina, do you have a comment? All right, who wants to go next? Albie?
I think talking about number 2, the plan of action, it is like pretty much everyone's trying to get get her a therapist, trying to find out what's, her school environment, trying to find out, but the one thing that stuck out to me was like, if she's having problems with big groups and everything like that, it could also be coming from home if she has to deal with living with the grandmother and all the cousins. It's like, how is that, how is she relating to that? How is she, handling that situation? She's probably already coming all escalated from home, starting at home. So we need to figure out, how we can help her in the home too.
Questions to that group? All right, next group. We're down to 2 groups. Iris?
Just kind of to go off what Elvia just said, kind of first wanted to figure out what was the grandma's role. Was she just kind of thrust into this position of having to take care of this child, or was she, more than happy to have this person? So finding out that home environment and really seeing the grandma's perspective, and then as far as she likes to be in control of things, so having her be in charge of a project or giving her some assistant roles so that she feels that she's contributing, she has that direction, and then as far as bullying other kids, maybe something on the the reflection is of your actions, which you want to be treated in the same way. If somebody else was doing that to you, and then really getting to that piece, and then also just enroll them in higher ground, let them work the back.
Questions to the group?
I think we also touched base on that, the control issue where we had that incident before where we did give a student that role and it kind of reversed on us where it was more of a negative towards other kids and everything like that. So I think when we talked about that and trying to maybe get her more into the mindfulness room and trying to work with her on a one-to-one, first, and then slowly introducing it because, try to be in a big group and then her trying to, manage it or, try to be in control of it. It's going to be hard for her.
Good point.
We discussed that too, and the solution that we kind of came up with was that she could work with our team member and kind of set her own schedule with guidance. So she feels all the kids really get to set their own schedule, but sitting her down on a one-to-one being like, so what do you really want to do? These are your options. Like, we were going to suggest the mindfulness room and art, but what do you want to do type thing. So guiding her in there. So that could give her some control, so she feels like she has control over the schedule, but she's not controlling other students. That could lead to that more bullying issue. So that's something that we talked about.
Any other comments? All right, last group.
We decided to go with child ed. We said that we try to slowly build on a relationship with the child, trying to use basketball as a hub in order to try to communicate with the child better, seeing how we figure that when the issue outcomes can have times where it could be to where he's trying to find a way to express his emotions. So if we were to say convince him to get back into school, we just try to, like the other groups have said before, try to really find a way to relate basketball to certain subjects in order for him to help him understand the math that that you said he is struggling with a lot, pertaining to the authority that the female authority is slightly bigger due to the fact that the mother works at home a lot. So with a one-on-one session with, I want to say like a male or female RTV member, it'll help slowly open him up a little bit more.
Questions to the group? All right,
So in that exercise, what makes discipline so difficult? Come on.
But we just see the surface of it, so we can't really discipline until we get to know the student better.
So there's the surface issue. You only see the tip of the iceberg. What else? Outside of what's drawn in there. What else really makes this difficult? Let's be real and honest and have a completely honest conversation. Why discipline is so difficult and why punitive systems are what's designed for big groups.
It's the empathy and the sympathy part of it. You feel sorry for them.
There is an extreme delicate balance. When it comes to discipline, there is a balance between this whole idea of grace or empathy, and also at the same time, the teaching and actual skill building. And depending on who you are as a person, there is sometimes too much focus on this and finding out what's going on, finding out the background, finding out this, and not enough focus on the skill that needs to be built. Or the flip side, you just care too much about the skill building. The skill needs to be learned, the kid needs to learn this, the skill needs to learn this, that you forget the empathy part and figuring out, going back to the iceberg, that that's just the tip of the iceberg. What else is problematic about discipline? In just that exercise, Alexis. Time. Can you guys imagine? I gave you guys 10 minutes to do that exercise on 2 kids. And gave you guys the resources that we have at hand here. Now I want you guys to picture a school, a traditional school where we operate at. That has to do 8 hours of curricular instruction. Correct, right? With no training on any of this. Okay, it took how many of you in a group to come up with that just for 2 kids? 3 to 6 members in a group. So time becomes a big issue here. That's why I said discipline is traditionally done at home, where parents are assumed to have the time. What else is problematic about this? So we understand the iceberg. This is just surface. We understand the precarious balance between the empathy and the skill building. We also understand the time constraints and the time it took to figure this out. What else is problematic here?
I mean, a lot of if their behavior doesn't match their behavior here doesn't match their behavior at school, it's hard to discipline because it's not, the action's not happening in front of you, so you can't point out the behavior and then let the consequence happen in real time.
So may I say that there are assumptions involved?
Yes.
In all our scenarios, a lot of us made behavior assumptions. That's normal. There's nothing wrong with that. But how do you create those assumptions? Why did you assume those things? You base it on what? Based on the information and what else? Experience. It goes back to personal bias. You base a lot of your behavior and root cause assumptions based on your experience, your expertise, the background that you were given, or the group that you're in. That's why the group setting matters. Because not all of us has the exact same experience or point of view and perspective. Now again, why is that problematic? Can you imagine again, back in a traditional school setting, how is this going to be possible? A group of teachers, counselors, different people with expertise gathering together to resolve a behavior and finding out the root cause. The time, the money it involves, the resources it involves, is it worth it? That's a serious question. Is it worth it? Our answer should be, yes, absolutely. But that's because that's our mission. Right? I say this because I want you guys to remember that the vein and the privilege we have and the advantage we have is that we are designed for this. So we cannot get frustrated at the systems that are not designed for this. The easiest thing to do in situations like this is blame the school district, the familial, the family unit, is to blame something. But in this moment, I'm showing you guys how difficult this exercise really is. Discipline is a lot harder than we really think. Even from a parental perspective. Because here's the reality. How many of you made guesses? Raise your hand if you made guesses and assumptions.
We kind of had to because we didn't have every single.
We kind of had to because we will never have every single detail. Never. Unless you are the parent. But even then, those of you who were kids once, how many details of your life your parents did not know? Right? There are details of your life your parents didn't know. Or they were blind to for a moment. So again, when it comes to this, we make a lot of guesses and assumptions.
I think when you're given the scenarios, if you look around the room, people are talking about, oh, that's this person. And it's not so much that you may not have been giving a specific students, but it gives us a starting point. You can get a head start by going, this sounds like, so that puts you a little further down the path, I guess.
Yeah. But again, that comes with the experience, right? For those of you, how many of you who don't work directly with kids kind of had a difficult time with this exercise? Why? Tell me why you had a difficult time.
There's so many factors that it's hard to prioritize.
It's hard to prioritize. Without experience, it's hard to prioritize. How did some of you guys know which one to do first? Because you've experienced it. A lot of you went to a child. Even without, I changed the scenarios. Yeah, but immediately a lot of you went to two children, and I can almost name them if there wasn't a kid here. Yeah, Jay was the boy, and the girl is L. See? Again, but that comes with experience. You get better at this job the more you do it. So don't get frustrated when you don't know what to do. This is the other takeaway from this, because again, you get better at this as you do it.
And sometimes it's good to hear from people who are not working with the kids as well, because we get so used to doing it over and over that we don't think outside the box, because we right away went, oh, this is like this kid, so we're going to do it exact same. So hearing different ideas from the outside looking in, oh, you know what, we forgot, we used to do that, and oh my gosh, that's so great. Because I think, like you said, that him being new and this team here, having that scale of their values, I didn't even try to listen to the kids, like what do they want to do? Because it's like, it was just.
You made assumptions.
We made assumptions already, so.
This is why in most societies that are successful with the youth discipline is a community effort. Why? Because as parents, what do parents tend to do? We are laser focused. We know what we want for our kids, and we do exactly what we want for our kids. But when the community is involved, what happens? There's other point of views. There's different assumptions that are involved. That's why that whole proverb about, it takes a community to raise a child, right? Because true discipline requires many eyes, many ears, many different factors. So again, this is why discipline is so difficult. So remembering that mindset that we have right now, I want you guys to really understand that discipline takes time. There's a lot of unknown factors to it. And here's the reality of it is, no matter how long you have done this work, you will never be 100% accurate nor precise. No matter how much this kid is exactly like the other 100 kids. There will always be that one that will be an outlier. And you will be like, none of the techniques worked. What the heck do I do? So part of this involves you consistently growing. Because here's the deal. It's just like being a parent. How I disciplined Kenji when he was 4 is completely different from the way I discipline when he is 9, and will have to be completely different when he turns 15, and will have to be completely different when he's 18. Being vulnerable here, I had a serious conversation with my son who is an adult, Timmy. And I had to tell him, look, Tim, I don't know how to discipline you now that you are an adult. I don't know how to be a father now that you're an adult. Why? Because I have no model of that. And this is new. But I know that my role still remains the same. He still needs me to teach him certain things. But what are my boundaries? Because it grows. And here's the funny thing. The way I will discipline Tim when he's 15 will be completely different from the way it will be from Kenji. I can already see it. It will be completely different. Because they're two completely polar opposites when it comes to certain things. The values are the same, but the methods will change. So a lot of this hinges on you being as creative and flexible.
How do you convey that to the child? So I know we've had the issue in the past of like, okay, well, they're getting special treatment. Like, I know we tell them like everyone's an individual and everyone needs their individual needs. But how do you convey that? Like, that was the biggest thing when I was growing up, is like, well, she got to stay up later. She got a popsicle. Like
Marsha, I got you.
That, honestly, there is, in my opinion, there is no correct way to answer that. It depends on who you're dealing with. To some children, the simplest answer to that is you tell them, because here's the honest answer. They need X, Y, Z. Some kids will understand that. To some kids, you just got to tell them it doesn't matter.
Does it relate back to like love languages?
It can. There's so many factors. But this is why discipline is so difficult, and this is why I want you guys to understand, and you guys have working in this kind of environment. But at the same time, to remember that this should not be your expectation of schools and other people. Nor should you get frustrated when parents are not doing this. Because this in itself is a skill. It is a skill that grows with time and experience. So understand that. And like I said, you know, it was funny, but you all made so many assumptions that could be 100% wrong. We all do. We all made assumptions. We're all happy at the end of the day. Yeah, here's our plan of action. And you know what? It takes about 5 seconds for that kid to blow that all up. Yeah, and they start running and whatever, right? Now, this is that not. It is absolutely worth the effort. That's why it goes back to our social philosophy. Because at the end of the day, do kids want you to give up on them? No. They want you to figure life out with them. All right? So now, this is where are the root causes, right? And this is the behavior. Now you blend that with multiple people, multiple traumas, personal biases, and you have a classroom. All right? So you blend all of that in, and you have a classroom. Sometimes that ratio is 1 of you, if you're lucky here, about 10. If you're in a public school, there's 1 of you. Well, here sometimes it's even 1:5. If you're in a public school, 1:20. If you're in PE class, it could be 1:60. Oh yeah, that totally happens. All right? So you figure all the many things that could go wrong. All right, so then how do you manage classrooms? Oh no, so problematic. Right, well, the first part is establishing values. Because believe it or not, a classroom is a community. It's a mini community. And in any community, the first thing you got to establish is values. Not rules, but values. What is important in our classroom? For us, like at Higher Ground, it's the whole respect and honor concept. Right? If you're in math class, the most important math concepts, that everything we're doing is based on blah, blah, blah. Now, we pass tests or whatever. But you got to establish that. All right, number two, all right, there's no substitute, all right, there is absolutely no substitute for good curriculum. And teaching. The more boring the class is, the more classroom management issues you're going to have. The more engaging the class is, the less classroom management you're going to have. It is literally sometimes that simple. I've been a teacher. I'm still coaching. And I can tell you that I will have classes that are so engaging, but then they go to other teachers and they act completely different. It's because I was crazy. My math involved fire, spiders, and blowing things up. My math and science, I think everything I taught involved that. I turned classrooms into jungles. I had hyper kids and all sorts of crazy kids. But again, good curriculum and teaching manages the classroom, because if kids are engaged, the less chance they have to mess around, and the more engaged they are in what they're learning, the less likely they are to exhibit behaviors. That's a simple fact. The other thing that you have to remember is that safe and nurturing environment goes back to our pyramid. You cannot expect kids to be leaders right away. They have to climb the pyramid. And it always starts with what? Safe and then supportive. In other words, your first job as a teacher, as a facilitator, is to do what? Make the kids feel safe and supported. I don't care how good what you're teaching is. If the kids don't know that you care, they won't care. Right? It boils down to that. Once it's there, then it becomes interactive. And then it becomes leadership. But you can't jump, right? We understand this. And then, right, session flow. Session flow is everything. You cannot expect kids to do the exact same thing for an hour and a half. For most kids, that's not possible. You have to break it down. Session flows. You can effectively run a rec for an hour, 30 minutes with very little escalation, regardless of who's there, given the right session flow. Because if you break it down, how many minutes can kids engage based on science? 15 to 30 minutes. 30 is being generous. In my opinion, it's more like 10 to 20. That's normal for kids. It is absolutely normal for kids to be distracted after 15 minutes. All right? That's the funny thing about our school system. Our kids are constantly engaged everywhere else, but for school, we sedate them. We sedate them and force them to sit down for an hour and a half at a time. And yet everything else in the world is highly interactive. 3D, all these constant media blasts, iPhones, iPads. And kids are born to be hyper, but what do we do with school? We make them zombies so they could pay attention. But the reality of it is, a good session flow takes care of a lot of the behaviors, right? And then, of course, a good plan of behavior. You guys remember this? Another pyramid, right? You have a 70% group. What's the 70% group all about? Who remembers that? There's a 70, 15, well actually no, it's 80, 15, 5. What's the 80%? These are your blanket values. This is what you do for the classroom, because 80% of the kids fit there. And then you have your second pyramid, and who are these group? You're kind of borderline kids. So you need a little bit of special things for them to do, so that way when they get bored, they have something. But you don't need to do that to all the kids in the classroom. That's just a small group of kids. These are the kids you separate from each other. These are the kids, the few kids that have that, right? And then you have a general 5% plan, and these are for your kids that you know they're going to do something crazy. So you immediately have a plan just for that 5%. For us, that's the RTE, right? That is our 5% plan. For the 5% of the kids, that's when you call the RTE. But for the most part, there's 80% of the kids in that classroom who, despite their trauma and all of that, have enough skills that if you have good curriculum and you've established value and you've established safe, nurturing environment and session flow, their behaviors will be here. It's the biggest fallacy we have. We automatically assume that because kids are in certain risky environments that their behaviors are bad. No. Sometimes it's the adult's fault. It's the teacher's fault. It's the people facilitating the class that's bringing out the behaviors. I'll give you guys the #1 example. We have brought organizations here to do classes that completely blows up to bits. But those kids don't act those way when we teach them. Why? They violate our very principles. That's why it rarely works. But again, this is all very important, because then there is that 5% that you got to deal with. And this is where de-escalation matters. De-escalation. All right, I'm not going to bore you guys with too much details, because for most of you this is a review. But here's the nitty-gritty. The first part of de-escalation is it requires practice. Why? Why does it require practice? This is against your human nature. You are not meant to de-escalate. Your reptilian brain, that is still a part of you, is always meant to fly away or fight back when there is a threat. So whenever there is high emotions that is considered a threat, you are not meant to de-escalate. That's why spouses get into fights. Even spouses who are married to psychologists who are supposed to be like experts at behavior, they still get into fights. Why? Because this is anti-human nature. So this is the first part. You have to practice this. All right? The second part that you need to remember about de-escalation is there is no single formula. Some kids, you can de-escalate by making a loud noise and getting their attention. Some kids, you do that, they freak out on you even more. Some kids, I can tell them, and this is one of the best ways now that I'm finding out for jiu-jitsu to de-escalate. Some kids get escalated by me telling them to breathe. Isa, right? So again, there is no single formula. All right? Like I said, I'm just going to go through the nuts and bolts. All right? And then the other thing that you guys need to remember, all right, is when you are de-escalating, there is absolutely no logic or reason involved. Which means, is this the time to discipline and teach? No, this is not teaching time. When humans are escalated, they don't care about logic. You know how people get you to buy so much crap? They remove your logic centers by effective marketing. This is the truth. Marketing is a science based on escalation. What they do is they escalate you in a different way. They escalate your emotions. Because they know that once you get emotional, you forget the logic behind things. Coca-Cola is one of the best marketing geniuses out there. Why? What does Coke do in their commercials?
They bring it back to like family and belonging, happiness.
I'd like to show the world to sing in perfect harmony. They use songs like that. Or Safe and Sound. The songs that they put. And then they put the whole names and how personal it is. How it's memories. They're absolutely using the pyramid. They're marketing geniuses. So what do? They put you on an emotional high every time you see the commercial, when logically, Coke has zero benefits and is absolutely pointless.
It doesn't bring you close to your family.
Doesn't bring you any closer to your family. You rarely drink Coke with a family member. You don't pick up girls by showing them, is this your name? Really now? You don't pick up girls or guys that way, right? It is not cute. It is creepy, right? It's absolutely creepy. Yeah, that is absolutely creepy. And you rarely enjoy family get-togethers with Coke in there. A lot of times, family get-togethers are messy. well, not that kind of Coke. Coca-Cola drink. All right? But what are they doing? They are escalating you through your emotions. They're putting you in an emotional mode because they realize that once you are emotional, there's no more logical reasoning with you. And then, of course, there's the addiction part to it. But because this is human beings. We operate in wavelengths. This is how stress happens, right? Up until this point, we make decisions based on logic and facts. When you're calm, cool, collected, you make your decisions based on logics and facts. Now, there are people who are never at this mode. It's a society we've created in. There are people that rarely get to this mode now. All right, look at elections. How do election campaigns work? Fear. Emotions. Listen to every electoral rhetoric out there. I don't care if it's Republican or Democrat. It rarely talks about the issues. Think about it. How many political ads have you seen that actually talk about the issue? Usually it's what?
Bashing campaigns.
Bashing the other person by making you emotional, telling you all the horrible things that person does, creating fear about the issue. This is what's the world's gonna end if you vote yes for this. Or giving you what you are gonna be so happy if you vote for this. Because again, right, when people are calm, they make logical decisions. Think about your life. When you are calm and rational, what do? You look at your decisions and kind of like, let's weigh the good and the bad. Okay? But the moment you start climbing up in the emotion scale, all right, there are certain points where things begin to stop. When you're halfway point, now it's an emotion versus logic. At halfway point. You know why some people are unable to make logical and factual decisions? Because they're constantly escalated. Let's take a person in poverty. You don't have anything to eat. Your car is broken. You have 5 kids. You got to get to work, but your car is broken. Your kids you're getting called from the principal's office because of your kids. That's a constantly escalated human being. So that's why some of our parents, they never make logical decisions. Where are their decisions always? Always on the emotional side of things. That's why it's like, why would you leave work? We have this one parent. We're like, you're about to get fired. Why would you leave work? Well, because my kids need me. No, they don't. They're fine. You think we'll win that argument? No, absolutely not. Because they're here. And then at a certain point, all your decisions become emotional. Ever got so emotional you said things you regret? Things you would have never said if you weren't emotional? Never. Never? Oh man, you're a robot. But as human beings, when we get to the highest point of stress, we make our decisions now based on emotions. This is children too. This is adults, this is you and me, this is children. All right, so it is important to de-escalate as early as possible. Okay? Why is it important to de-escalate as early as possible?
The more logical they can be.
The more logical they can be, the better your chances are of being able to get them to where they need to go. The more escalated a human being is, the less logic and the less likely they are to listen to you. And here's the deal, when people are emotional, there is such a thing called the backfire effect. That is when people, literally, the more you prove them with facts, the more they will believe the opposite. So until people are calm and rational, there's no reasoning with people. That's psychological. That's why the only way you can really change a person's perspective and beliefs is to build a relationship with them, get them to trust you, so that when they're talking to you, they're not talking out of emotion. They're talking out of logic. And then you can have a clearer conversation with them. So when kids, this is the funniest thing, in a school setting, kids are angry, what do teachers do? They fight back. They imitate them. Yeah, teachers blow up. Go to principal, blah, blah, candidacy. Oh, you done, dang it. You done it, hey, Aaron, right? That might be a funny video, but that is reality. So what happens? They just keep escalating. And now you have two human beings that are absolutely emotional. And so what happens is when you don't, is then threats or shutdown happens. This is how you get kids to become aggressive. Fighting fire with fire. If a kid is already angry and escalated, the last thing you want is to get back right at their face and be angry. You will not win that battle. Because kids are more hard-headed than you are. More stubborn than you are.
I think Isa could win.
Until she finds an Isa.
Yeah, that's true.
Right, she's right there. We go round.
Yeah. Right? So again, remember these facts, all right? So when kids are escalated. Now, how do we know they're escalated? Right? Signs. Well, let's do it from minor, where they're only here, to the worst. All right, so the first part is they start zoning out. What else? They what? Yeah, so the part of the zoning out, there's an apathy involved. They start giving you what's called attitude. They refuse cooperation. Right? They clench, fist, teeth. They raise voice, change language. Some kids don't cuss. But you can tell there's a change of language and tone. Right? Some people who are bilingual, they start reverting to their original language. That's totally true. Right? I don't think I've ever been escalated enough in here that I start speaking Filipino, but it has happened.
You could just go off on a kid and they wouldn't know what you're saying.
Yeah. All right, what else do? They start pacing. They start doing what?
Hiding.
Huh? Zoning out, hiding. Then they start running.
Start swinging.
They start physical. They get physical. They start pushing, start punching, right? At this point, you really lost it. All right? What else? What else happens? How do you know the signs? Because again, the earlier we recognize the signs, the earlier we should use the escalation techniques. What else?
Crying.
They cry. Start crying. When they start doing things, they're escalated. Now it's not the time to discipline them. Now it's the time to get them to relax and calm down.
Don't say calm down.
Yeah, don't say calm. Okay? Breathing changes. There's the eyeballing.
The 1,000-yard stare.
The 1,000-yard stare. They start fidgeting. Right? So again, the earlier you recognize the signs, the earlier you need to use the escalation techniques. So now, for the escalation, right, there are some non-verbal, the first part. You have to remember that communication, is it mostly verbal? It's mostly non-verbal. Okay? So it's so important. Most of your de-escalation techniques comes from what you do not say. All right? So the first part of that non-verbal technique is doing what? What should you be doing?
Get it down to the
Eye level. Staying physically neutral. That is so important. You cannot de-escalate a kid with your arms crossed.
Or talking with your hands.
Or talking like this. Right? Maintaining a neutral physical expression. What else?
The tone of your voice, too.
Tone. This is why for some people it's so hard to de-escalate. You have a high-pitched voice. Do you know that scientific studies have shown, do you know why women like low, manly voices? Why that has been defined as manly?
It's calmer.
Because they're non-threatening. That is literally the answer. All right? They feel that a low voice is non-threatening. And it's more security. All right? You need to lower your voice. It's the only time I have a low voice. It's when I'm de-escalating a kid. All right? Because high-pitched voice, all right? What else? Here's the other reason why it's so hard to de-escalate for some people. Non-verbal. Facial expressions. Need to be neutral. If you frown, you giggle, you smile, that can absolutely take it to another level of escalation. Or you hear the one, "You're mad at me." Oh
Yes,
my God.
that's why we're talking.
And then they absolutely don't listen to you anyway. Right? So keeping your face neutral, right? What else? What else can you do when you're de-escalating? Personal space.
Or asking for permission to like touch them, to like give them a hug or anything if they're crying.
It depends. That's why we just put it as personal space. You got to know whether this is the type of person that you need to invade their space, or this is the type of person that you need to keep your distance. Nothing to do with aggression. It has to do with the person. Some kids are not aggressive, but you still want to keep your distance away from them because they get escalated when people are in their space. Some kids are hyper aggressive, but they want you to invade your personal space. Right? It all depends, right? There's that personal space. Here's the other thing that you need to remember, right? So in this thing, right, fear is contagious. You know what's the easiest way to create a mob mentality? Fear. Incite fear. It's the easiest way. Yeah, Beauty and the Beast. It's the easiest way to create a mob mentality because fear is contagious. Doesn't have to be logical. That's the whole point. All right? But on the flip side of it, calm is also contagious. Being calm, remaining calm, is just as contagious as being aggressive and being fearful. Remember the first belief that we have? Children, what is it? Learn anywhere, anytime, everywhere. Guess what? When they're escalated, they are also going to imitate your response. So if they see that you are just as emotional as them, subconsciously, what do people do? We mirror.
Or you try to outdo.
Or you outdo. Mirroring is a real technique. One of the first things you learn as a salesman is the best way to sell to a person one-on-one is to copy their posture. If they're sitting laid back, you sit laid back. If they have their hands crossed, you copy them. Because by nature, humans like familiarity. We are comfortable with people who look, talk, and act like us. That's by nature, right? And so in the same sense, kids will mirror you. That's why when I de-escalate kids using breathing techniques, I breathe right with them. I go, or I tell them, walk with me. I'm having them mirror what I'm doing. Walk with me. Let's walk together. Mirror the voice. All right, let's relax. Take a deep breath. Relax. Take a breath with me. Right? There's something about calm that's just as contagious. Ever had that friend that you know you can just cry on? Not because they're as emotional as you are, but you know that they'll always be calm and stable? No. How many of you have those friends? Or you are that friend? Right? That you're just like, or not even a friend. You have that one parent. You have that one parent that you go to when you're emotional because that parent stays calm and relaxes you. Kenji said that it's definitely not Isa. Right?
Please don't come to me with emotion.
Right? And then there are certain people you avoid when you're emotional, unless you're an emotional leech too and you like that. Right? But there's certain people you don't go to because you know they will escalate you even more. It's the same thing here. Right? People mirror. Okay? So those are some of the things that you guys need to remember, right? Facial expression, controlling. This is also a lot about you controlling your own breathing. Why does your own breathing matter? Why does your own breathing matter?
If you're breathing fast, they're gonna mirror you. And
one is they're going to mirror you, but there's a second reason. It's the best way to keep you calm. It's a simple thing. When you're stressed, Because when somebody is escalated, your natural response is to be stressed right back. That's why de-escalation is so hard. So when you're stressed, right, blood doesn't rush to your brain in a normal sense. And your hormones get all out of whack. And you release specific hormones that make you even more stressed, preparing you to be able to fly away effectively or to fight effectively. That's what your body is doing. That's why when you're angry, you get super strong or super weak and disoriented if you're not aware of it. But if you're aware of it, when you're angry, you know how to channel that. That's what boot camp is for. It teaches you how to operate in that stress and be more effective. Right? The problem is that's exactly what you don't want when you're de-escalating. You don't want your fight or flight responses on. How do you turn it off? By breathing. By getting more oxygen into your brain and telling your brain that you are not stressed. It's a simple brain trick. Because the way your brain measures your stress level is by your heart rate and the oxygen intake. When you breathe slowly, what happens to your heart rate? It slows down. And when you breathe deep, what happens to your oxygen intake? It increases. So then what does your brain think? What does your brain think at that point? That you are not stressed. Then it's easier to go eye level, not get aggressive. It's easier to stay calm. And it's easier to do a lot of these things. All right? Questions so far? Like I said, this is a review. Okay? So now, actual techniques or tools. Again, this is not universal. All right? What are some techniques that you can use? Now, verbal techniques.
Verbal techniques?
Or even nonverbal, because this is mostly what you need to do to be able to implement the techniques. Okay, so now, actual techniques. What are some of the things you can do?
Explain the situation. Ask them to explain. Motivational interviewing.
So, well, that's after you calm them down. Right? So, what are some of the things you can do? You want to repeat yourself. Right? You want to say, all right, come on, let's go for a walk. Let's go for a walk. I need you to relax, calm down, take a deep breath. Let's go for a walk. Okay? That's the second part. It's distraction. Distraction matters. Why does distraction matters? Going back to this.
They stop thinking about the situation.
They stop. And once you get them to stop thinking about the emotional piece, they slowly come back down. So that's why walking with them. Some kids making a loud noise. Some kids, that's not effective. Some kids, it is. Distraction. Some kids, it's literally pointing them out to something. Hey, why don't we look at this painting? Why don't we look at this color? Why don't we do this? Here's the stress ball. Why don't you squeeze this? Distraction matters, right? And again, being repetitive. This part is so important. This is why you have to be patient. You absolutely have to be patient when you're de-escalating. Some of us fail at de-escalating because we are too impatient. We want the result right now. Right? We want the result right now. So when we're de-escalating, what happens is we don't get the result right away, so what do? We lash out or we give up. And then what happens? What happens when you do that? They get re-escalated back. Right? So it's so important. Distraction, repetition, what else? What are some other techniques? What do you got to do? Since they're not logical and they're emotional, what is the best thing you can do to an emotional person? You have to what? Acknowledge their emotion. You got to acknowledge it. I understand you're very upset right now. Why are you so upset? It may be the absolute stupidest reason in the world. I'm upset because he looked at me. Acknowledge it. Okay. Acknowledge it. All right. There's nothing wrong about acknowledging feelings. Right? What a person feels is not wrong. What they do with that feeling is what's wrong. And that can be the teaching time later. But you cannot stop a person from feeling a certain way. That's their feelings. You cannot invalidate that. It may sound stupid, but that's what it is. Acknowledge their emotion. All right? And then what else? Outside of acknowledging their emotion, what else do you have to acknowledge? You got to acknowledge come on, guys. You're supposed to be the situation. You got to acknowledge the situation. Okay. It may be their reality and perception, but during the escalation, that is not the time to tell them you are wrong. You're being stupid. You completely saw that the opposite way. That's for later. That's for when they're here, because there's an end to this, and that's called reflection. That part is just as important as the de-escalation. When they're escalated, your only job is to acknowledge their emotion and the situation. You guys ever watch hostage situations and how good hostage negotiators do it? They don't tell them you're stupid. Right? The negotiator don't tell them you're stupid. What do they tell them? What do you need? What do you want? I'm really glad you're doing it this way. I'm really glad you haven't hurt anybody. Right? That's how you do it. I'm really glad you're choosing this. Okay? What other things do you need to do? Huh? Constantly seeing where they are. Because sometimes the best way to de-escalate someone is to leave them alone. We don't do enough of that with kids. Because sometimes we want them to give us the answer right away. No, if they're safe, and they're not harming anybody, and they're not affecting your classroom, let them sit down, relax, and leave them alone.
Never mind.
Okay. All right. What else? What should you tell them? Tell them what you want them to do. Remember, they're emotional. Rather than telling them what you don't want them doing. Don't tell them, don't hit this person. Think of something else. Why don't you come with me and let's hit the bag? I don't want to do that. Okay, why don't we just take a walk? Why don't we just do this? Tell them what you want them to do. Because the more you tell them what to do, again, it's just like they're emotional. They're not making logical decisions. Use that to your advantage. You're emotional right now, all right? Good. You're not going to think about what I'm asking you to do. You're just going to do it if you like it. Part of this is relationship, because if you know what the child likes, then it's easy to do that part. So now, like I said, the problem with de-escalation, it's not universal, right? But there are universal things that you avoid. What are the things you avoid? The first one that you should avoid during de-escalation. Do not reason with them. Please do not do that. They are escalated. This is not the time to negotiate. If you stop crying, I'm going to let you do this. One, when you negotiate and reason with them, you know what you just did?
Gave
You gave them leverage. You have to remember that when people are escalated, it's a power struggle. There is a power struggle dynamic at play here. They're going to see which one of you is going to win. The moment you negotiate, you gave up. It's reptilian brain. Okay? Kids are not operating with logic. This is just like you and me. They're operating right now with reptilian brain. And in reptilian brain, everything is about power and survival. So if I negotiate with you, I just gave up my power. So you never negotiate with them. You do not reason with them. You absolutely, absolutely remember that they're emotional. You have your hands raised?
I've done it sometimes where like I'm trying to de-escalate somebody and I like will compromise with them, like they really want something and I'll be like, that's definitely not gonna happen, but like if you like come here or like do this, then like this will happen. That's like never an okay thing to do, is compromise.
There's a difference between reasoning and negotiating and necessarily stating what's going to happen. If you are negotiating with them and giving them a reward for them to do something, then yes, that's never okay. But if you are telling them, here's what's going to happen and here's what you're going to avoid, if you come here, that's perfectly okay. Because again, you're telling them what is going to happen and why you want them to do it. It's a redirection. So understanding that thin line is important. Does that make sense? Redirection is absolutely okay. Okay, so I want you guys to understand, redirection is absolutely okay. That falls under distraction. All right? What else do you avoid? It goes along with reasoning. This is the threats. Do not threaten. Do not use threats. Why? What happens when you use threats? When a kid is escalated? It goes back to the power struggle. Oh, okay. You want to go there? Let's go there. The moment you threaten a kid who's escalated, you lost the power struggle. All right? So do not use threats. Threats don't work when they're escalated. When you are in the reflection session, sure. Make sure you can carry it out, though. Okay? The other thing is, don't take it personally. This is hard. I've made this mistake over and over. I still make this mistake. Remember that when kids are escalated, they're not escalated against you. They're escalated about the situation, the scenario, PTSD, there's trauma involved, or they're lacking the skill to manage their emotion. It's nothing personal. It's not about you. Don't make escalated kids about you. Oh, I'm such a failure, they escalated. No, stop that. It's not about you. It's about the child. Kids will escalate, especially certain groups of kids. They will escalate. That's okay. Don't take it personally. All right? The other part, all right, is avoid. It's not a do not, but avoid using sarcasm or humor. Now, why do I say avoid? There are certain people in this world that are absolutely crazy, and you can actually use sarcasm and humor to de-escalate them. There are certain people. But in general, if you do not know if those are that type of people, avoid using it. I know I can do that with Isa.
Well, what's funny is I looked over and Desmond looked at me and I was like,
Yeah. Isa is one of the few people that I know that I can literally de-escalate her by saying something absolutely sarcastic or saying something funny. And then she'll stop and she'll calm down. But if I don't know the child, I will never do that because it's the best way for it to backfire. Oh, let me tell you a joke. Knock, knock. Bam, knock that. Seen it happen. All right? So again, avoid it. Unless you know the kid. All right? Questions about this part? There's one more part to this. What is the one thing kids hate the most? Huh?
Embarrassed.
embarrassed. Do not humiliate them. This is another thing that we commonly do in class. What do? We point them out, humiliate them. And then we wonder why they keep doing what they're doing. Oh yeah, now they take it personal. Right? Humiliation is the number one thing, in my opinion, that kids, especially middle school and up, hate. They absolutely hate getting humiliated. In discipline time, you can absolutely use that to your advantage. If you don't keep turning in your homework, the natural consequence is me going to school with you. Watch how quickly they turn in their homework. And I've done it. Sometimes they still don't do it. Right? But again, okay, during escalated times, so don't humiliate them, because at that point it becomes personal. Because then at that point, now they see you as the enemy instead of the adult ally that you need to be. Now this is how you get kids who talk behind your back. Think about it. If a teacher ever humiliated you when you're escalated, think about what you told your friends afterwards.
So nice.
I'm sure that's what you told your friends afterwards. Now, once you are done de-escalating, she's so nice. Sure. I'm sure that's what you told your friends. Right? I appreciate that teacher so much. I'm so glad she humiliated me. All right, the most important part after de-escalation is reflection. Why does this matter? Because when things escalate, there is a break in relationships. That's only normal. Think about it. When you've had a fight with your parent or your spouse that got escalated, there is that awkward face. And usually, what's that awkward face about? You don't know whether they still love you or not. You don't know if they're still happy with you or not. You don't know. There's a level of embarrassment. Will they still accept me after I've shown that? Hey, let's be real. That happens in normal relationships. So in here, reflection matters because this is where you bring the relationship back. And assure them. This is where they find out it's okay. The behavior is not okay, but what happened is okay. But the first part that I said absolutely matters, why reflection matters, because this is where you get to teach and debrief. This is when discipline matters. Okay, we cannot keep doing that every time you're angry. So the next time you're angry, what are we going to do? That part matters. Because if all you do is de-escalate them and then leave it alone, what did they learn? Well, actually, they learned something. Remember, children learn anywhere, anytime, everywhere. They learn something. They learn how to push buttons, but what else? They learn how to get away with it. They learn that if they escalate, the adults will forget the consequences of their behavior. Believe it or not, that's what they learn. Or that they can get attention by escalating. They either learn that tantrum fits get me out of situations. So the next time somebody's trying to teach me something, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to throw a fit. Because then these people are going to switch to de-escalation, and then they're going to forget the original issue. And you may think, man, you paint kids as humans. That's what we humans do. Don't tell me as adults we're not aware of this. We are totally aware of this. We do it. We just do it less often because hopefully we've matured. But we absolutely use emotional outbursts to manipulate people. So with kids, this is definitely important because the reflection is when things matter. And also, why else is the reflection important? Because this is when you can set behavior goals. This is when you can tell them, okay, here's the plan. Again, if you don't do this part, if you don't do the reflection part, then the escalation becomes useless. It becomes a cycle that you repeat over and over and over and over again with kids. And don't build them any skill that is not destructive. Because like I said, children learn. So if you don't reflect, they're learning something, trust me. They're learning how to push your buttons. They're learning how to get away with things. They're learning how to manipulate. Maybe subconscious, but they're learning that. So it's important we do the reflection part.
I think it also brings, I'm sure it kind of resets things, lets them know that, okay, this event is over, and we're going to go back to the way we were, and this isn't personal, this isn't a, I'm not mad at you, you're not mad at me, this brings all together.
Brings resolution, which is a very good point. When you reflect with kids, it brings them this idea that, okay, going back to bringing the relationship back, it brings resolution. Okay, this happened, but now it's over. Now this is what we're learning. Now resolution is important because again, if you've ever had those guilt of talking to a person because you escalated, it removes that part. Removes that shame, that guilt. And then there's one more thing that's very important here. If you reflect, it teaches them two things. Number one is conflict resolution. And number two is emotion management. Because guess what? What did you just do when you de-escalated them? What did you do? You modeled how to manage emotions. You absolutely did. You modeled how they need to resolve conflict with other people. Oh, when people are angry and upset, I don't need to be angry and upset right back. Look what Mr. Andy did with me. He stayed calm. He listened to me. And then now he's teaching me, I can do that too. So next time my sibling is throwing a fit, I don't need to punch my sibling. You guys see that? All right? So that's why that part is so important.
It's also important that when you teach them to emotional management, that we're not just telling them what it is, we're teaching because we want them to know that if you recognize that feeling when you're at school, you're fighting with the tools they can use elsewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why it goes there. It teaches them those two things.
When do you give them like reminders?
Well, you can give them reminders whenever, depending on your plan. It's absolutely good to give them reminders, especially if the escalation has a trigger. If you know that every time this happens, every time this happens, you get escalated. So the next day when they come in, hey, remember, you need to recognize that when you start feeling this way, what do we do? And then you remind them of the coping mechanisms you hopefully taught part of the escalation. Other questions? Why do we all need to learn de-escalation? Why do we all need to learn de-escalation?
It's important in like your everyday life to de-escalate yourself, to de-escalate people around you, to de-escalate the kids you work with.
I want to point out the first one that Isa said. Because we all need to learn to de-escalate ourselves first. Because we all have stresses. And we all come into work with our own personal stresses. And you cannot not effective and help them if you yourself are escalated. So one of the first skills you need to learn is to continually de-escalate yourself, to remain calm. If you guys notice, a lot of the de-escalation is all about how you control your response. De-escalation is about your control of your own response. And we all need that. Because at the end of the day, how many of us really know how to control ourselves when we're angry? Or when we're emotional? Most of us don't. Most of us do exactly what kids do. Most of us. I didn't say all, but most of us. So for the most part, again, we need to model that as well. So de-escalation is not just because we have escalated kids and we need to de-escalate them. No. It's because we need to learn how to be patient, how to stay in that mode of being calm, how to stay in that mode of being gentle, how to stay in that mode of being kind, how to stay in that mode of self-control. Because that's what de-escalation is. But more importantly, you cannot de-escalate, honestly, if you don't love the person. Because why would you care? De-escalation is too much work. But if you love that person, then you'll be more patient. You're okay with being gentle, you're okay with being kind, and you're okay with controlling yourself. Make sense? Questions? No. All right, so for our reflection, we're going to do this quite simple. All right, I want you, and we're not going to share. We are just going to write this down. All right? And you don't need to share it. You're just going to submit it to me at the end of this. All right. I want you to write two things. It's two simple things. All right. The first one, all right, is I want you to write, kind of like what we did yesterday, something eye-opening for you. Okay? First one is something eye-opening for you. Okay? And then the second one is something that you know personally, you currently do, or you currently manifest as a behavior that you personally know you need to find some sort of way to discipline yourself or learn to de-escalate yourself. If you tell me you can't think of anything on number 2, you are not being honest with yourself. Like, seriously. So number 2 is, I want you to name either a behavior or something personal with you that you know you need to discipline, you need someone to discipline you, teach you, or you need to find a way to self-discipline yourself, or you need some way to de-escalate yourself. You can either write them down or email them to me.
Is it just those two?
Yeah, it's just those two. And again, you don't need to write your name.